attended them. They're very stimulating. So, but it is good to see what the schools are doing and how the students are learning. Because we've changed our format, I have gone through and looked at each of the grant proposals, and some of the information I feel like is good. Some of it I think the schools may need to tweak based on our new guidelines. And then Alton has updated our spreadsheet, and that is ready to go. And in the past, when we've had some questions about the grant proposals, we've allowed the schools to adjust them. And I think in a few cases we need to do that. And as much as I had to go through these one by one because we have a different format, I think we need to do that, and then we'll take time to go over what Alton has done. And for those that didn't know, Alton's not going to be here this morning. He has a grandchild on the way, and so he will hopefully be here tomorrow. So if you all will turn to Middle Tennessee State University for the architectural and engineering, or the engineering program.
It is. If I could interrupt you, let's for a minute, because I didn't do this. Let's just do a quick roll call since we do have one person out. We do have quorum, I believe, but we'll go through it. Okay. Susan Ballard?
Here.
Robert Campbell?
Here.
Blair Parker?
Here.
Frank Waxter?
Here.
Alton is not here, unfortunately, but he did his tasks last night. Brian Tibbs? Here. Thank you. You do have quorum.
Okay.
So on the iPads, you start on page 55 of the main document. They may not be in the order that Susan's going to call them out. So.
Basically, I printed them off how they came to us. So CBU, Christian Brothers University, is the first one, so let's find that. And then
55.
Madam Chairman, may I ask just a quick clarification, because I know this has changed, and I want to make sure that I'm on board. Basically, the grants are really supposed to go for equipment or what? So look, I know we had some discussion about that earlier. I just want to make sure we're on the same page because I know there were some qualification changes to this. So
that is not how the law was worded. It can't be exclusively for equipment. It needs to have a direct impact on the students and their school and learning experience. However, many labs are used by multiple students, and so the equipment will give them that impact. But what we've asked them to do is to come up with other options to use the funds in a way that the students have a different enrichment in their program. And many of the schools have done that, some better than others. And so since this is our first year and we're changing our method, I'd really like for us to go through them, and I know we haven't had to do that in the past, and it's going to take a little bit of time, but I have highlighted. I do have some that have questions, and Alton did update the spreadsheet based on the student enrollment, which is very important, and so that helps us in determining, the numbers, and so we don't have to worry about cross-referencing that part. But of course, some of the grant proposals are 3 pages and some are 28, so we'll just have to do the best we can in the amount of time and keep it moving. So
I interrupt for just a second and only add one piece that I had sent when I sent the proposals in the email, but I want to reiterate. As the proposals came in, and this time I too had to review them more in depth, if I had any questions or concerns, or there was obviously no direct, clear indication of what was program money, be it exams, be it a field trip, be it other educational opportunities, conferences, things, I went directly to Sherelle Hooper. She is the attorney that has guided us through this, and Joe can attest. So we already went back and forth. Several universities have sent in their second or third draft. Many immediately had it exactly as we think we want it. Because there's no set ratio of what they need to have. So even if it was a small percentage, that would qualify. But at least in the review that Sherelle and I went through, that piece should be met. That doesn't mean that you all are happy with it or don't have other questions, but I don't want us to be overly concerned that that piece hasn't been met, because Sherelle has looked at the proposals.
there are a few I don't think it does, and that's what the ones I want to talk about. But again, it's the decision of the entire committee, not just me personally. So that's why I want us to look at them, and I apologize not having that to organize these last night. So Does anybody have Christian Brothers? All right. Good. This is probably the last one. Oh, thank you. Theirs, I don't think we had any issues. They're wanting to spend $3,000 of their appropriation for license examination fees.
Susan, I need you on the record if you're not being heard. Now you are.
Okay. They have to pay to use a machine shop, so they're asking for money to do that because it's shared with another program. And then they need equipment for batteries and then partly a 3D printer. I think all those requests are fine. Into the spreadsheet, then we can make sure that all that works out with the amount of money that they want.
The mic is not turning on when you're speaking. Thank you.
Okay. So, with Christian Brothers, what I see that Alton has got is $15,883 out of the $20,000 they have requested. So, are there any questions on this one or any thoughts from any of the other committee members? Do y'all need a minute to look at it?
Just real quick, what did you say of the Alton? This is Alton's spreadsheet, right?
Go to this one.
Oh.
That is Alton's, but he went ahead and made two different spreadsheets. The first one that you have takes into account what they're asking for, but not the mathematical distribution to the 350. So then he had to make some adjustments to the percentages, and this one in color reflects the adjustments to balance the student population with what's fair. The engineering universities would have ended up with more than 92%, so he took those percentages into account and followed sort of what we did last year as well.
Okay, great. Okay, so that was the 15.
Yes.
Okay, I'm good. I was looking at the wrong one.
Okay, so the next one is University of Tennessee, Knoxville, which includes the architectural program, landscape architecture, and interior design. And this is one of the programs that I questioned one of the requests. And if you all will look on page 3 of their proposal, they break down 3 activities that they are requesting for. The first being a field trip for students, and I think that one is fine. Then the second one is under operations, and that is to have the expenses paid for jurors for the projects. And while the jurors can give students really good feedback, I feel like that's a smaller number of students that would have an impact as opposed to students that would be able to use something in the Fab Lab or whatever. So the $17,000 for that is something I'd like to for us to discuss. And then the third request is for a piece of equipment for the Fab Lab. And we have paid for other pieces of equipment in the past, and I think many of us have toured that, and it's a very good facility that all the students get to use. So I'd like some feedback on the jurors' request for $17,000. So.
When I went through this as well, that's one thing I flagged, because I'm not sure, and that's the purpose of our discussion here.
And I've been a juror there, and I know they can't use everybody in Knoxville all the time, and it's good to bring outside people in. But that's about a third of, the money, and I just feel like that could be appropriated a little bit differently. Robert, do you have any thoughts on that?
I actually had, had a question mark by it as well.
Okay. So, yeah.
I'll just do one dissenting, but the only thing it is something that is so critical to the architecture program on all 5 levels, 5 years. So it's even though it might be punched, I think it's something that'll affect all first year through 5th year, and even potentially even probably the master's program too. So although it may not hit like a Fab Lab, it really is going to be something that could be spread out. So in some ways it could have even more effect in some ways, because they're bringing people that will be, pouring into students from all the years. So I don't have a serious thing about it because it's just something they'd have to pull from somewhere else if they did it, and this may allow them to bring in, have them more attractive to be able to bring in those type of crits. So anyway, I don't necessarily have a problem with it.
Of hands about whether to accept this. Frank, you got any thoughts? I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
I understand, yeah.
It's a 2-day, event, and from Gensler or HOK or all these larger firms are bringing in, they've got resources to send these people. I don't feel like we need to spend our state funds to take care of this. I think, it could come from their own firms. If they want them to do it and they're there for recruiting, I don't feel like we should be paying for it. Now, I'm a graduate UT, so I'm arguing against it, but, I just feel like we need to use the money in another way. Help the kids with exams. They haven't put any of that in here, and that's an opportunity that would be a direct impact for the students. So, I'm sorry, Frank, go ahead.
Middle of the road on this, because, I went to architectural school a long time ago, and nobody paid anybody to come do our critiques. I guess that's the thing now. But I do, one of the things you said, these big firms, we're paying them, UT's paying them to come do critiques, but are they also looking for prospective employees?
Because they're doing it at the same time as they do the job fair. So,
Yeah, so,
A lot of universities ask us to pay to get a place at a job fair,
Right.
So, I mean, that was kind of my whole thing, was it's almost like you're paying them to come in and gives almost an advantage over somebody. You're getting paid to come in and do something that somebody else is having to pay to go out of their pocket to go do. So it just seemed a little goofy to me.
now I guess if we don't approve this must be money that's been previously being spent.
no.
It's
No,
not. That's
previously,
something
it's
new.
been equipment, but this is.
No, I mean.
I'm sorry.
Not, they didn't ask us for money for it.
Correct.
But has UT been spending that kind of money
I don't know.
for, okay.
I don't know. That would be, and they're not sending a representative today, so we can't ask them.
Actually, at the last minute, I got one
Oh, really?
yesterday, so,
Oh, okay.
yes. And I have the list. Give me a second, if I can figure out. David Matthews with
Oh, good.
UT Knoxville is
All
going
right.
to be here today.
Great. We can ask David, but he's not, I don't know that he has that answer, but we can ask David later. So I feel like 3 out of 5 say no, 2 are on the fence as far as spending the money.
Well, I'm still yes, but I'm
Okay.
I can be the minority of.
Well, you can
One
have your
last thing too.
opinion.
It's not just although they're recruiting, but you're getting a perspective that you don't get. I mean, you know this, Susan, and I know you guys too that have had to get crits, but you're getting a different perspective. So it is. I mean, even if they're there to recruit, they're also there to what they get. What those students are getting is unique because it's something. If it's a project that this company has done, and that professor hasn't done, they're getting a whole nother perspective into their project. So it's, it's wherever they may be coming to recruit and they may just be pouring back into them. So I look at it more that way, but it's okay. I'd get outvoted, but that was just to leave that point.
Well, and I think the program is a wonderful program. I mean, I wish I would have had that when I was in school and had that exposure. I just wonder about using state funds. It just, somehow it doesn't sit well with me. Something that may be used for several years, a piece of equipment or helping students become licensed or whatever. It seems to me they could shift some of their funds and use it in a different way. And I think that's where I am. It's not that I'm opposed to the program. I think I'm not wild about spending $17,000 for that event that may certainly change people's lives, but I'm not sure it's going to reach as many people as maybe some of the other possibilities would be.
Let me ask a question from the architect's perspective. what would a person from New York that they would bring in, what feedback could they give different than some of the very talented architects that we have here in the state that have worked on projects nationwide? I just don't understand. Maybe I'm being a homer here, but I don't understand how you guys have worked on projects in multiple states. You guys have worked on projects in multiple states, and you've dealt with regulatory bodies here or whatever. And I just don't know how that's much different. But I'm just asking.
Well, part of the program, you get different projects, so they don't necessarily just be a specific this type of project. That's something that maybe that are just in just in Tennessee. I always remember Auburn one year did an infill in New York City, and they flew up there. It was a little. And I went to school in that area, so I always wondered, why would they try to do a project here? But they did. They did a full design, and they went through all the crits on it. But who better to give them input than a New York architect? Whether they were there to recruit or not, but just to say, you guys looked at it this way, but let me give you some other urban planning type of concepts that you probably may or may not have been exposed to. So to well round our education, we have to have that. We can't just have the straightforward type of problem solution. So sometimes it's just great to get some input from someone who's using that example, that's done that type of urban design type of projects, and that can help a student understand maybe some things that were challenges or about their projects, and they can use that going forward. And if it's something that happens in second or third year, that's just something they can continue to grow on until their fifth year, and they may decide I want to do more urban design based off of that project's success and what I learned from that one experience. So anyway, that's why it's not just it's not downing. The same thing could happen to us. If someone asked me to speak about a convention center in Nashville, and I went to Los Angeles, wherever, somewhere that hadn't done it before, I could tell them more experiences that we had, and something that you just wouldn't get from your typical pool.
For most of us, college is we will get more exposure during college than we will most other times of our lives. So I think it's positive on that way. But I wonder if this application were to send students to Italy to look at the architecture or landscape architecture or engineering of Italy, would we be so, would we feel the same way? Because that could come next. I like the program. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying anything wrong about the UT program. I'm just not sure about spending this money for that purpose.
And that's my point too. It's not that having a jurors is wrong. It's wonderful. I just don't feel like we should have to pay for it out of funds. That's all. So
I've got a suggestion. Apparently this has been vetted and said, yeah, this meets the criteria legally. So, and what I'm hearing is this is a new program. Why don't we give it a try? Get some feedback. If they come up with this again, and it may be that, I'm willing to try new things. But I have some reservations, like y'all are saying, that whether a person that comes in from New York for 2 days during a job fair and does, he's not going to do 100 critiques, 3 or 4 maybe. Now, if everybody's gathered around and gathers information from how this goes, and usually for the student it doesn't go well. but anyway, if it's an idea worth trying, so I would change my middle of the road to vote for it, even though I think it's still 3-2.
Joe and Tammy, can we have some input from you all, from your all's perspective in procurement?
Good morning. Joe Underwood, serve as legal counsel for procurement for the department, and work with Tammy here. We process the grants and contracts for the department with CPO and help guide that through that government process through the comptroller's office and with the general services to do this. Our recommendations in this matter was kind of concerning of how directly do these grants going to impact the students. That was the situation while we got involved, I think, last year regarding what the requirements are for CPO and other requirements for contracting and grant awarding. I mean, I was sitting here thinking of a picture of kind of thinking the best way to describe this situation is if the universities came to you and asked you for money to put in a parking lot on their campus, that would be outside what you'd want to do. What they came to you and said they want to put a parking lot outside the engineering, architectural, design building to be used by the professors and the students. You're like, well, maybe that's a benefit. But if they came to you and said, well, we're going to put that parking lot outside the engineering, architects, and design building, and the students get to park free. That's the impact I think we're looking at. That how directly does this impact the students directly, and what reward are they getting out of this, such as reduction in fees, exam cost, other things. If they buy equipment for a printer, is that a printer they get to use for free? Are they still paying? They have the use of the printer, the 3D printer, but are they paying for it where they'd have to? So I think that's kind of that's the guidance I'd give you to look at it in these programs, is to see how is it affecting the students you're trying to help. And that's what we look for. And there's not a percentage. There's not. It's just that we saw what happening was it was all equipment or it was all supplies, and that was our concern, that there needs to be something showing that the students are hit. And so I don't know about the rest of UTK's program. I don't know how much is directly impacting students, but that's what you got your guidelines and your legal counsel and your director to help you through. But if there's any questions regarding that, I hope I was able to help a little bit.
That's good input, and I'm kind of I'll go along with Frank. Let's see what happens. I mean, I just the only thing again that just concerns me is most projects have the same fundamental elements to them, and a lot of college is learning those fundamental elements and how you go from point A to B to C. Yeah, there may be some whiz bang things that somebody's doing somewhere else. But I'm just not sure that bringing people from far, far away gives more validity, but it may. So let's see what a report says in a year or so. Let's see what they come up to. Maybe hear something from the students saying this girl from Delaware did something and it changed my life, or I don't know. I mean, maybe that's what we need to do and see what that looks like. But Again, I'm probably being a little bit of a homer, but I think we've got some extremely talented professionals in the state of Tennessee that go do a lot of things across the nation that can give a lot of this same input that somebody that you're paying a travel fee and everything else to come in an honorarium to do. So, like selling our state short because we've got some outstanding people. So I'll go along with, again,
The pressure. I'm fine to give it a try, but how do you measure that?
Yeah.
To come next year, how do you measure that, whether it's a success or not? I truly believe the program, and I differ with Mr. Campbell. I think bringing people in from a distance, from a different world, and New York, for example, is a different culture than we are here, and what they do, how they look at life, how they look at using what we do and creating is just totally different. So I think that's wonderful, exposing students to that. But like I said, I'm not opposed to the program. I just wish they would have chosen some more hard areas that we know is fact. It would sure make the decision a lot easier. So, getting back to what Robert said, I think I'm fine to go along with let's try it for 1 year. My concern is that there's no good way to measure that. So come next year and they ask for the same thing, I don't think we can say no to it because we've allowed it this first year.
And it also means other schools are going to look at it as an opportunity as well. So, see, I see it as a domino. And I have an issue with paying an honorarium with state funds to an outside entity, and so anyway, but it looks like it's 4-1 right now, so.
If I could add, as far as maybe a thought for the feedback, and Jennifer and I will keep talking about these as we move the grant pieces, so it's a great moment to start this. When the grants are presented and feedback is given and students come or the universities come, I know last year they did this, we said, maybe give them very specific guidelines. I think what we can do is a situation like this that we've definitely discussed and may not be 100% sold on, we can ask, being Jennifer and myself, the university when they come next year, that we specifically want data on this, whatever that means, so that when they carry out this jurors and they invite and they have something, they keep in mind that the board would like to hear how that was carried out and the impact on the students. I think as a board, you have that right to say, we really want to hear on this, because this is a new concept. We do want some feedback indirectly. How will you measure this? I think only letting them know in advance will they be able to keep something, whether it's statistics, notes from the students, whatever.
So, that being said, and I'm not disagreeing with it, 4 out of the 5 members on this committee will be gone next year. And so there will not be anyone here that even remembers that. So, Jennifer, you are in charge of making that happen.
We've got it.
Anyway. Okay, so at this point, 4 out of 5 are saying yes.
And can we back up to Christian Brothers real quick, because I just wanted to give,
Okay.
we kind of went over that. I think what they did, and I saw UTC do this as well, where they found an outside source that had some of the equipment that they needed, and they were willing to go partner with them, because they're not going to use it 24/7 or something, and they're going to use it. I think that's exactly the kind of mindset we need in our universities, when you've got, again, local resources, assets, ability, that they go partner with that rather than go buy a $20,000 3D printer that they're going to use 5 times during the year. I want to. I just want to go, I kind of went over them real fast and I didn't get to that, but I just think that's great, and I think that's the way this whole thing can get turned around quicker if we have that kind of mindset. Thank you.
And for those of you all that don't know, the fabrication lab is used by the architects, interior designers, landscape, graphic design departments, and is located in a building off campus. They have classrooms there. They have every kind of equipment you can imagine, and it's open 24 hours a day. And so the students can come, between classes to get work done. So to me, that's basically the same kind of concept where 2 different programs are using. And I don't know if engineering is using any of it, but it wouldn't surprise me. So anyway, okay. Well, I think we have a general consensus, 4 out of 5 on that. And we'll ask for them to give us some background and feedback on that next year. And so the next school is the Tickle College of Engineering. And a couple of things that I wanted to point out about that program is that they have had a 63% increase in enrollment over last year, which is phenomenal. Which goes back to our request last year when it was 11% that we would like to have more funds. And I don't know where that conversation went, Roxana, if it got somewhere and stopped.
It did, and
Okay.
we can discuss it again. It was determined to not be the right time to necessarily increase this.
Okay.
And so if at the Friday meeting when the full board votes, we want to carry that out again,
Yep.
I think then it'll be the second year in a row that we've looked at everything and seen the need.
Because last year we averaged $33 per student across all of the programs. That's not a lot of money, but when combined they can do something important with it. But it's wonderful that kids are enrolling in school and they're getting an education. The percentage of females in the engineering and sciences has increased. There are actually more females in engineering and architecture than men at this point. And so I think we need to give as many people opportunities as possible. And moving toward that, I want to talk about what the Tickle College of Engineering is doing. They have a program where they are working with students as freshmen to help them get through the tough part of the year. So they have senior students that are mentoring the younger students and high school students to get into engineering and to be able to be successful. And one of their requests is for the C program, SEA, which I thought was a great idea. It's called the C Bridge Program. And it also affects the Office of Diversity, which is also important. And so I want to commend them for creating a program like this so that students can have a fighting chance and get an opportunity to be in a profession such as engineering. They're also using money for the FE exam, which is great, and let's see, what's the other one? By the way, the acronym for C is Summer Engineering Advancement Program, and it is to provide unrepresented pre-calculus ready students majoring in engineering an opportunity to advance to calculus beginning the fall. So it gives them a chance to kind of get over the hump. And obviously the engineering program is one of the largest in the country. It has over 4,000 students and multiple programs. So they have a exhibition where the students present their projects. So they're asking program spending for that area as well, including the venue, the printing of their posters, and they're asking for event parking for guests. So I don't know if that means renting the parking lot, but to me, that's also not a direct student expenditure. But Joe, does that kind of go back to, what you had referenced earlier?
Well, I think our recommendation, and I'm going through guidelines, is how does it directly impact the students?
Well, it
And
says for
that's-
guests.
Yeah.
It doesn't say students,
That's-
and that was my flag. So,
That's the thing I think you'd want to flesh out a little
Okay.
more. That's the concern I think we would have is, the other way we're talking about, it's easy if the students are going to New York, you're like, okay, they're going to New York, we know what the benefit of that is. Now,
Yeah.
if they got these people coming to help them evaluate, it's a little more difficult. But I think that's the track. I think
Okay.
you
All right.
identify things like that as, what does it relate to the actual students?
okay.
Thank you.
Well, if it then said parking for students, that'd be one thing, but they didn't, and so I really feel like that is something they need to reallocate that money to another area, so,
Is that the $750?
yeah. So. I'm not trying to be super picky, but this is our first time doing this, and I want to make sure Joe is really.
Well, and I think just getting some clarification on that, because these guests that they may be talking about may also be judges and other people. We've helped sponsor this.
They can park in my parking lot at my office, and I'll take them there,
Yeah,
know.
well, there is a cost. I know the university charges back for use of extra parking, so unfortunately, it's a state thing, paying another state thing, which always seems a little goofy to me, but whatever. I understand we got to keep the books. But I think a lot of it's guest parking and, people coming in to judge competitions to kind of help set up and that kind of thing. But some clarification would be good, and I think it's probably justifiable if we go that route.
I think they would need to flesh that out with more, but we would look at that because y'all deal with parking here. I mean, you know how this goes. It's one of those things that's, is that academically, that's convenience. It seems like convenience fee instead of an academic system.
Well, number 5 is an operational support engineering professional practice. Guest speaker series is a new program. Do you all have any thoughts or comments on that?
Seems like after reading it, kind of falls in line with the last thing, except for a lot less. But it sounds like you got engineering is also looking at bringing in guest speakers to speak about different things. So it seems like it's kind of consistent with the last thing that we were talking about. So I would be for it.
What they're speaking, though, on is co-op and internship opportunities. So do y'all feel like that's a direct impact for the students?
I think it's a direct benefit.
Okay, all right.
I think every engineering student should have an internship at least once during their career. I think they get a lot more out of that than most.
As for a licensing fee, I believe, for software, and then they've got nuclear engineering training, and so they also are requesting that some students go to a training program, I believe, in Nevada, Idaho, excuse me. So is everybody in agreement with that? It's only 3 students, excuse me.
$1,000 on something, so I mean,
Asking. Like I said, we're doing it different this time. Okay. I don't hear any objection, then I'm going to say, well, other than the $750 with clarification, then we're good with Tickle. Is that? Okay.
Just with this
Yeah.
information.
Okay. All right. Let's see what our next one is. Lipscomb. Lipscomb is asking for $14,000.
Your light hasn't come on, any of this. Thank you, Susan.
The Lipscomb is doing FE exams for students, for seniors, preparation for them, and then asking for equipment. So all three of those fall within our guidelines. Are there any questions about that?
there's some commercials in that wind tunnel.
Uh,
You seen that one commercial?
No,
The
I don't
dog
watch.
in the wind tunnel.
I don't
yes.
watch TV very often. So anyway. Okay, any other thoughts, comments? Everybody okay? Okay, all right then. Let's go. MTSU Engineering. So they are asking for funds for their capstone projects for their seniors, which is direct impact, travel and operating costs for experimental learning programs, which is also a direct impact for students. And let's see. The request is $20,000, so, and I believe the funding, $17,079, so almost all of it, so. Are there any comments?
Yeah, the only comment I had on this is obviously we're sending, part of it is to send kids abroad, it looks like. And I would assume that they also have to pay something, and this is just to kind of defray part of the cost, I'm guessing. And I didn't see that in here, but sometimes I miss things.
We're sending to Ohio, aren't we?
Yeah, it's not abroad.
Is in Germany? Students travel to Germany, visiting many cities such as Munich, Dresden,
Oh, yeah,
Berlin,
okay.
learn about historical perspective.
Okay. Well, they're
400
paying-
per student, okay, so
Yeah,
they are.
they are
okay,
paying
that's
part.
They are paying part of it,
Yeah.
okay.
So,
Okay.
okay.
I'm okay with that.
Anybody have any thoughts? No? Okay.
Good.
Okay, MTSU is good. All right.
And I'll say one other thing about MTSU and brag on them a little bit if I can, because I always, I mean, that's where a university saw a local need and developed a program that goes after that local need in their Megatronics program. I think they presented this several years ago, and I think it has been very successful. So I again, always want to spotlight those that are doing some good stuff, and I think that's one that really is. Even though Tech and MTSU are.
Okay, the next program is the MTSU Interior Design Program, and they have a proposal, get to their numbers. They're wanting to use money for the examination, which is good, and equipment, and for a total request of $3891.35. So, next program, get through all that. It's East.
Them to change their name.
Tennessee State University?
Interior architecture.
Oh, that's a different committee conversation, okay? Trust me. So, all right, so they're requesting equipment, and they're also asking for a fellowship to send or give funds toward a fellowship to study in Rome. They want a laser printer, and then they have matching funds. So the grant request is $39.10. So how does the out sending a student for a 6-week internship, and then they'll be coming back as a student assistant to the faculty. So, and they are getting a department for that trip. So.
So, I mean, I think I have the same kind of comment as before on some of these others. I think the sounds good, but how we measure what that success is. I mean, do they teach a class in Roman interior design? I mean, I don't know.
I said it would be architecture and interiors.
Whatever.
So, yeah.
I don't know how we measure that exactly and how we see what that success is, and I'd be curious to see what that looks like.
So it helps support the airfare and a small food stop. And so I don't know if they would be living in another school dorm or whatever, because I didn't stay, but we can ask, because they are coming to the 11 o'clock meeting, and I know we need to stay on track to get through all these. So
Of course, you kind of know where I think it'd be awesome though, because some especially when they can't afford to send themselves, and this gives, like, I couldn't go to Europe because I could never afford it personally. So, like, to know there's a scholarship. I mean, I know this is interior, but similar thing, and they always came back with such a different, whole, kind of expanded view of design. So, I would definitely be for this one.
being to Italy, I've been. I know
Well,
how
yeah,
great
but-
the experience was. So.
Well, I don't know. I have to ask mine. But anyway. And again, I had a daughter that spent a semester abroad, but again, it was part of their tuition, and they had to compete for those spots to go, and I ended up having to shell out quite a bit out of pocket too to pay for some other things. So while I understand there is a benefit to that, I mean, it's just like if I send one of my engineers to a seminar, I would expect them to come back and tell us what that seminar was about and help educate the rest of the office. I'm not just sending you out there just to keep that knowledge. So I'm just curious to see how that brings back to the rest of the student body. That was my comment.
I'm good with it. I mean, we sent our daughter to Italy, and we paid for every bit of it. But it was a wonderful experience. So any little bit of help, $2,000, it's not the entire ticket, for
Right,
sure.
it's not. Okay. All right. Then we'll move on.
Speaking of that, do you know how deep the canals in Venice are? Yeah, well, I got,
Depends on if the cruise ships are coming in or
no,
else
the ones interior, they're only about 5 or 6 feet deep,
Okay.
and I got called on the carpet by my spouse for talking about the hydraulics of the canals in Venice while we were over there, so,
Well, Venice is it's lowering, right? Isn't
Yeah.
it shrinking into the ocean?
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
It is.
And when the tide goes out, there are certain places you can't get to.
Yeah. Without walking on the
And they've got a little sewage problem too. We talked about. So anyway, it was
Big
awesome.
sewage problem.
Fun things you get when you go on a vacation with an engineer.
Did you embarrass your wife?
Oh God, she hated me for about 2 days. Hope she's not watching. She's already.
Okay, next up, University of Memphis and College of Engineering. Is that correct?
I think we have architect
Architecture,
first,
excuse
and
me.
We're on page 108 on your iPads.
Okay.
Thank you.
Trying to get my paperwork separated. Okay, Let's move on then. All right. That's the first letter. I know we've asked people in the past to not put so many descriptive things about the departments. So they want to establish a lecture series for the students, which I think is a good opportunity. 13,500. The second priority is instructional capabilities and program delivery. These computers will be placed in undergraduate. I know University of Memphis has struggled with funding to get enough equipment, blinds, furniture, everything. So that was $9,937, and then they're also asking for money for student. Best is for chairs. Again, trying to set up their classrooms for a total grant of $29,920. So $23. So about half of what
They also have a chunk under the interior design piece, so UT Memphis is similar to UT Knoxville. So based at least on the breakdown from Alton, we have $15,823 on the top part, and then $4,073
Okay.
on the other. So
All right, well, that will help.
they are getting their full amount, I believe, or close to it.
Yeah,
Yep.
they're short a few thousand, so, but that's still helpful, so. Is there any questions or thoughts on their request?
I participated in the program over there, and I will tell you, all of this is needed from what I can see,
Yeah.
from my perspective. So I think it's a wonderful thing.
Well, I don't think we've ever had a concern about Memphis not needing more than what we could provide for them, so I'm glad we're able to give them more this year, so, anyway, okay, all right. Let's look at, get through that. Okay, UT Memphis Engineering, is the next. So they are wanting to provide funding for the FE exam, and then the practice exam for students, and augmenting engineering course fees to reimburse the PPI Learning Hub for a total of $15,000. One, because I see 30 up here and then 15 down here. They break it up in two parts, yeah. So $30,000 total. So, $7,652. Robert, you got any thoughts or comments on the engineering side? Glad to see they're helping the students with their examination fees. And then Chattanooga Interior Design. Let's see. So they're asking for money for the FS exam for students and 3D scanning equipment. Freshman startup packages, so all those meet the criteria. Started school, just the cost of supplies was unbelievable just to get started. And so they're trying to supply 6 packages for that, and then 4 examinations, and then 3D scanner, iPad. So $3,078 is what they're asking for. Next program. UTC Engineering. They have 176 students at this point, and they're asking for funding for the
And I'm sorry
examination.
to correct you. They had originally sent in as their numbers only the chemical engineers. So the
Okay.
176 is incorrect when I
Okay.
compared it to last year and we looked at it. So they have corrected it. The number of students is 1,402. And so that's the spreadsheet that you have now
It's a
and
big
and the correct
difference.
amount.
Okay.
Yes, yes. And what they did made sense, but I told them to compare apples to apples. We need all their engineering
Okay.
students.
All right,
Thank
so
you.
they're looking at examinations for 15 students. They're also asking for funding to compete in the Solar Splash, which would be student participation and projects, for a total of $27,273. Is that still the same? Okay.
Yes, it is.
All right. So you- able to do the full funding for them, so. Some of the programs that the engineering students get to participate in are really cool. Great learning experience, and they get to use their creativity and their education to create wonderful new things, so kudos to them. Okay, next program is Vanderbilt. And they are asking for FE exams, funds to purchase and use specific equipment of instrumental equipment, and funds to support student travel to engineering events for the total of $35,986. And I commend them for putting that all in one paragraph right at the top. So I feel like all of these meet the guidelines that we've asked. Not enough to break down the cost of gasoline, so I'll give them credit for that. Questions or thoughts on this one? They have 1,443 students in engineering at
Good.
$1,443 students at Vanderbilt. Basing it off of what was in the proposal, so. Excuse me. Okay, Union University. Present for $7,008.50 for equipment.
I've got a different
Excuse me,
figure.
And then next page is student fees.
you.
It's
All right.
$1,400 for $8,408 total.
Yep.
So, are we good with this one? So that's good. All right.
I'm going to ask kind of a whatever question. And just can we, as part of what we send out next time, give them just kind of a little table form to be put in maybe the beginning? Because that has, here's our request. Item 1, item 2, item 3, item 4, whatever. Here's the description, here's the cost. Just in the very first part of what we have, and then all the description stuff can be later. Sometimes you get, as you go through some of these, you go back and forth, and it's not sure exactly what they're asking for sometimes, because they're showing this, but then they're only asking for this. And if we can just have that, just a standard table, and a lot of them have got that information in here already, it's just again, I don't know if it's easier for you guys, but I'm used to looking at bid tabs and stuff, and it's just easier to see those numbers spelled out one time. And they can go all the explanation they want to, but it does help somewhat to say, okay, you're asking for $7,032, and it's item 1, 2, 3, 4, and here's the descriptions, and it kind of helps do the math a little bit easier rather than flipping through 7 pages to go, item 1, here's a description, item 2, here's a description, and that's just, I'm getting older and less attentive to things. So.
I live your pain, because this particular time I read every single one of these, whereas last year I was so overwhelmed I obviously didn't. But I get it. So when we work on the guidelines, because this time I think we will as a full board, and if we have time, the committee can start looking at the guidelines that we know are going to need to be defined a little bit better to include the programs. The question there would be on the guidelines we have that they need to give us count of students, number of instructors, those pieces. Do we want the guidelines to also then include some type of tab? And we can come up with that table of, because if it's expected to be in every proposal for the proposal to count, we probably need to put it in there, and that way we'll definitely follow up next year. So even if we don't come up with the table at this meeting, we'll create it and send it out for the committee to view, and if we like it, we'll put the table inside the guidelines, if that sounds good. That way we can hold everybody accountable for that.
Nice to get 10 pages of what the equipment looks like.
But that's
But we
good.
don't-
That's good to say, oh, I've got a question, let me look and see what that looks like.
Yes.
Need a recap.
I don't
But-
want to look through everything
I
to
know.
get to the answer. I
Yeah.
want the, I mean, and that's a more effective
Yeah.
form of communication anyways. Here's the
So-
important stuff, and then we'll go look at the other stuff later on.
And for Tennessee Tech, in their defense, they did a good job showing where they had received state funds, where they had not. And they got 0 state funds last year, or for this coming fiscal year, for chemical, civil, computer, electrical, and mechanical engineering. 0 funds from the state for equipment. And that's really disappointing. So, anyway, and I think they did a good job describing everything. But when it comes to the bottom line, it's what we have available for them. And so they are asking funds for the FE exam for 52 students, which is approved. Guidelines. They have a student development program with a STEM mobile, which we have seen a presentation on before, which is also very good. And that's $9,290, and then they're asking for electrodynamic fatigue test machine, which is also an approved student benefit, for a total proposal of $45,000. So I think we are able to give them, if I read this right, $38,000. So are there any? Martin. So this is also the College of Engineering, and this fall they have 236 students, 7% increase, and they're asking for $17,000 to enhance instructional capability, as well as supporting the student in the capstone projects, which is required. And so the equipment is $17,000 of that funding amount. If I'm looking at that being for the capstone program. So based on their enrollment. So it's pretty close to what they're asking of the $17,000. So
All those programs are good things.
Yeah, the
A lot of
capstones
students
are
getting
great.
involved in
Yeah.
the Bajas and the canoes
Yeah.
and all that stuff.
So it would be interesting for them to show us a little more of the capstone projects next year. So, okay. Belmont and O'More. So for those of you who are not familiar, O'More School of Design moved to Belmont College, and they have created a new architecture program which will start accepting students next fall. And because the cost to move the program and get new classrooms and equipment, they're asking for more than what we've typically given the schools. But they have 54 students, which is really good enrollment for their first year. So we wish them the best in their new endeavor. We are looking at $6,170 of the request of just over $10,000. So also gave us more information than we needed. So anyway, they are asking for funds for presentation, drawing, and, oh, this is a piece of scanning equipment for them to use for their presentations. Last one is Tennessee State University, and they're requesting $25,000. And
With somebody administration, not
Okay.
the actual engineering person.
they need to make sure that John's name's not on here.
Oh, okay.
Or they just probably copy-pasted something that was old. They have 596 students, which is awesome. And so, they would like to have funds for a 3D printer and a cart, a VR cart, and conference they would like for students to attend, so they're asking for registration fees for the design competition, and they have a student
I add a small piece before we leave, since this is our last one, and you all have done phenomenal on time to have covered all 17.
Yep.
This is awesome. So with TSU, if you recall, last year, we were not able to distribute any funds to them, and the reason being that we didn't have what we had approved was changed at the last minute. The board hadn't had a chance to fully review and approve it, but we did, and we had a refund coming, and it had not been received. So last year, they didn't get a chance to get any, unfortunately. This year, they are, and I'm thrilled that he's able to join us at lunch as well. So we've gone back and forth a few times with the proposal you see, which does meet what we need to do. I am still waiting on the refund or proof of the refund. So
Okay.
I have spoken to contracting folks and asked that they look at that, just because it is the executive director's responsibility to have all the receipts and disbursement cleared, and I don't have that. So we may be able to deduct that. I think it's $1,500. It's not a large amount. But so the amount that, based on Alton's, if you go with Alton's recommendation, we end up here, I think it's that 15,000. We may, or is it 20? I'm struggling with a line. It's 20,698. So if we do have to change it, it would be because of that reason. So even if, and I would update the board the next time. My hope is that we don't, and that maybe somewhere we've just misseen the receipt and no one's responded. But right now, with that lingering, I would have to hold that back.
Armstrong, do you feel like we have met the guidelines that procurement needs with all these requests for funds?
It appears to be within the I mean, your review has been thorough, and I think you've taken the first step in this process. I do think in the future, it may be one of the things, if you're having guest speakers come to the universities, to flush out, maybe, are they eating with the students? Are they having a meet and greet, like some kind of special event that the universities could flush that out and make it a little more clear for you to easily say, yeah, we could pay these people to come to visit the campus, because we're exposing these probably leaders in their field to our students and so forth. But I think y'all did a great job so far and got through an amazing list in a good amount of time. I'm quite impressed. And good luck to y'all. I know a lot of you will not be here next year, but I think you'll be able to help the future board members to go forward with this.
Thank you all for your time today.
Thank you.
You got a question from the
Yeah.
crowd?
I'm Chris Gwalney from Lipscomb University. Excuse me. I think that our dean has corresponded with your committee about an extension for our spending the money from last year's grants.
Roxana, do you have that?
It would be with
request?
the contract folks, and I believe they gave them an extra month, but it would be in the contract, and it would be with Sherelle directly.
Okay, so I just communicated with him email, and he has not had a response.
And I think
Um,
I've seen one. I'll be happy to forward that.
Okay.
But it would be from Shorelia. It wouldn't come from me, but I'll make sure that that goes out.
Okay,
Absolutely.
awesome. So I have another question regarding that. So last year, when that grant was sent in, Dean Myrick was on his way out, and Dean Elrod was on his way in, although really not there. Dean Myrick was actually on his way to somewhere overseas to do a study abroad program, and the list of items that Lipscomb wanted to purchase weren't actually the correct list of items that we wanted to purchase. No one caught it until this year when Dean Elrod was preparing this grant. He realized that he didn't have any idea if any of the money had been spent. And so I think Dean Elrod is going to be here at lunch today, and he'll probably talk to you about this. But we were curious if there was any way that we could spend that money on items other than those that were listed in the proposal.
I think that falls similar to what happened with TSU. The contract itself includes the proposals and the board's approval via a motion to give them for certain things. If there's a change, the board would need to be presented with the change and pre-approve it before it is made. We have made an exception at one point because of a similar change in deans and confusion to the process. So I think if the board has the ability to approve what has been done, I know we considered it once, we probably could. They'd need to see, because your receipts are not going to match what we've been expecting to get.
They want to match the contract.
Correct, they're not going to match.
And that may require a contract amendment, which is
Yeah.
different.
Okay, so it's all a possibility. We just need to follow the guidelines to
In a hurry.
accomplish that.
And are we talking
Right.
about, this
Okay.
is the grant that needed to have been spent by June 30th, that you all asked for an extension past June 30th. Is that correct?
I don't know. I haven't
Okay.
seen the request. I just know that Dean Elrod sent one in, so, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Roxana,
Yes,
do
ma'am.
you want to go over the new method that Alton presented?
Absolutely, and not being the math whiz that he is, I don't know that I can explain all the numbers, but I can the logic. I know that he took into account total enrollments, which gave us a total at the bottom. He's got 11,879, and then redistributed the percentages to be equitable between the industries and not give 92% to the engineering industry and then not leave a whole lot for the others. The percentages that or the amounts that you've got at the very far right in red balance out the entire $350,000. And so he's got some differences. He accounted for all those differences, I think, and tried to take into account everything similar to what we did last year, which fortunately he was here as well. Hates to not be here today because the questions, if we needed to delay things, would possibly be more in his brain. But even this adjustment factor that you've got down there, based on that 19,655 adjustment factor is how he ended up balancing what could be added to each of the universities, if that helps.
Yeah, it looks like he took the grant amount that was below the possible grant and just carried it over. So like the first one,
Yeah.
49,9, whatever that is, 996, there's a zero, and then any amount left over, he distributed that. He put that back in the pool to be distributed. So, I mean, kind of did that all the way through, and then those that were over, he took off those amounts based on the percentage of the enrollment, right?
Correct.
I think
correct.
Philip Lim, that's Philip's old spreadsheet that he came up with 100 years ago.
It is.
yeah.
It is. I think so, and it is. We've carried it. When I found it, I was thrilled in John's item. So I think it's a consistent. It still needs always that tweaking of the math and at the final numbers, but thank goodness he did this, because I think as you all took all the extra efforts to look at each of the proposals here, and again, I'm thrilled that we were able to touch them all. You all, thank you, Susan, flew through them, and it made sense. And I think the proposals were well written. Even the universities that had to go back and forth, they understood what we wanted. I was really impressed. I really thought it would be more of a struggle for them, and we'd have some things that that were just completely outside barriers. We talked about the international travel, and contract said, yes, it looks like it's still benefiting the students. So even that, because I did have concern with international travel. But all that got cleared. So I think all those things considering, we've got some decent numbers. You all can still tweak these, but you've got something.
Well, the continuing request from me, and I'm going to ring this bell all the time, is that, if we've got surplus funds, this is a good place to put them. And with one college having a 63% increase in student enrollment, that alone, tells you how important our program is to help them, maintain the quality of education that we want to have in the state of Tennessee. And, that's just one program, not the other 16 who've also had increases. And so I feel like it's important if we can take surplus funds and put them in those locations. It's going to benefit us all, down the road. So, and strengthen our education system as well. So, are there any other questions about Alton's update to the spreadsheet? I know we've just seen it and we really haven't had time to digest it, but I think my one question is, I feel like we probably have fewer funds for landscape architecture, but because it's part of the UT architectural design program, they benefit from other funds that they have available. But that's my only concern, is the fact they have less than what we did last year, but in any rate.
I'm good with everything. I would say, I'm assuming this form will change in the future. It will be modified.
It's going to be based on enrollment, correct?
Yes.
So,
So I would really like a date to be placed on this,
Oh,
so
yeah,
that we
that's a
know
good
the
point.
iteration that this is.
Right.
Because it's very easy to be looking at the incorrect one.
Right, right.
I'm guilty of that way too often.
good point.
And I too, one of the things I think this the best part of the grant program, besides the fact of giving students greater opportunity, which we as a state should do wherever we can, because I think education is number one. The big thing I think the grants do, it increases that communication between the board and the universities, the learning institutions. So I really appreciate this program.
One thing I would ask, Jennifer, I guess it's been maybe the last 3 or 4 times that we've asked the deans to come and do a presentation of what they do with the grant money. We started that once when I became chairman, and so I'd like for you all to continue that, even though I'll be gone next year. And next year's do that on even-numbered years. So 2020 will be the next round of presentations, and for those of you who have not seen them, they're amazing, and I would invite you all to come back. And there were some opportunities last year when we saw some of them where they were doing underwater drones, and they were using it for one scientific experiment, but then I said, well, what about finding drown victims? And they'd never thought about that. So the fact that we can interact that way, and then they can develop something that might help search and rescue. So those sort of things are a great opportunity for the programs to work together and to have time to look at what other people are doing and how they can interact and share classrooms via webinars. And so it's really a good program. Plus, it helps support the board in the registry of students who become professionals later, because they understand who we are and what we're about, and we're here to help support them. And so I want us to continue that legacy as a grant committee, and it has been my pleasure to serve in this particular capacity. So,
Thanks for your effort on
Yeah.
this.
We thank you.
You've done a very good job.
so unless there's any other thoughts, comments, then we're going to recommend that we move forward with this new allocation. Are we all good with that?
Or a motion or anything?
I think we should, because it's a lot of money. So,
Okay.
Then I would like to move that we move forward.
second.
So, yeah.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Like so. All right.
I have a motion from Mr. Waxter and a second from Mr. Tibbs to move forward so that the full meeting tomorrow can hear an update, Susan, that you'll present, and that we're moving forward with these amounts. And I'll make sure that they too get to see the spreadsheet. We'll update it and date it, and then move this on to contracts. So I want to commend everybody, because we lost a month or two in this process and really all ran with it. The board was wonderful at talking about it. Legal guided us. I think this is fantastic. And I, too, in reading these, was really impressed with what the universities came up with, to be honest with you. The other piece is we've talked about the increase in amount, so whether it's worth discussing a little bit further today, because we've got a few minutes, or we want to wait for the full board. Do we want to, last time we addressed it last year was 50,000 extra to round it to 400,000. Is that a motion we'll want tomorrow as well, to look to 400,000?
Because when you look at the grant request now, it's $406,480. I
Asked for, yeah.
we're on track with what, the requests are, and obviously all the schools need more than what they're even requesting. So if we can help, make an impact in that, I think that's something we can do. And, as a taxpayer and a registrant, the money that I spend on my dues, to take a portion of that to this, to me, is well worth the investment, so.
And I'm going to agree with that and kind of expand a little bit. I mean, we've got a reserve sitting out there. I think the board has been well managed. You all do that, as well as hopefully our oversight has helped some. And so we have a lot of registrants. They support different organizations within the state of Tennessee, publicly and privately. And I just think it's a shame to have some money sitting out there when we're financially very solvent, well-run. Our sunset hearing went, I think we've gotten to 6 years this time, right, instead of so, I think it's a testament to what we've been able to do. And again, I just think having that reserve sitting out there for almost just as a number on the spreadsheet makes no sense to me. And I think a $50,000 impact, as we've seen, because we've left that much on the table this year, has some impact for our kids coming up. And and one of the things that the thing that's going to hold Tennessee back, frankly, is educated workforce, and we're already starting to see it in almost every industry across the state. Our industry, down to every industry, finding properly educated people to fill those roles that we need, because people want to move into this state, and to have that amount of money sitting out there that could kind of go to help spur that effort seems to be a little bit not a good steward of what we've been given. So I would hope we would make that motion tomorrow as well, and bump it by 50. We've reduced some fees and dues, and we still keep going on a good path. So anyway, that would be my comment.
And the Finance Committee meets this afternoon at 2, so I think that's also a conversation that can carry over to them, because we didn't necessarily put anything on their agenda to do, but that would be a good place to also readdress it, so that by the time the full meeting is tomorrow, we can kind of make sure everybody's on the same page. Yes.
I want to go ahead and get on the record now, because Rick Thompson's the chair of that, and he makes me nervous, so I didn't want to say it.
In here.
Robert mentioned something that kind of triggered a thought. Those students that are going abroad from our grant money, it would be nice next year for them to have some kind of report, or the deans could report on the students. And Dean, I know you're in the back room, so you're hearing this firsthand. To have some feedback on their trip and how it affected their perspective and their viewpoint of the design industry. And so that always helps, the board approve things like this. So anyway, any other? Say that we are adjourned.
If I could give us some feedback, as we are off the record, now we're having that conversational learning opportunity for the board members and the deans, and so we will be in room 1C. The table is set up in a way that everyone can be comfortable, look at each other. You can talk. I've got some talking points we'll put out there. We won't start till 11, so the board has a few minutes. If I could ask that in the table itself, we're going to respect the board members sitting there and the deans, just in case we run out of space. So us as staff will be on the chairs. There's plenty of room, I think, in the room, but we want to make sure that the opportunity for conversations are right there in the U shape. makes sense. And I want to thank, obviously, Wanda Gardner and Phillips and everybody else that has gotten our lunch sandwiches and everything set up in the room so that we can take these 2 hours that aren't a lot to be able to have those conversations that are so important. So,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you all.
Thank you.
Good afternoon and welcome back. We are back on the record, and this is the Laws, Rules, and Policy Committee meeting for the Architects and Engineers. Today is Thursday, October the 3rd, and proper notice was given to the public for this meeting, as well as yesterday's and tomorrow's full meeting on September the 25th. So I will turn it over to our chairman, Mr. Rick Thompson. Would you like me to go ahead and do roll call?
Please, thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Mr. Thompson?
Present.
Susan Ballard? Here. Robert Campbell?
Here.
Blair Parker?
Here.
Kathy Ware?
Here.
And Brian Titz? Thank you. Everyone is here.
All right. Just a quick question on the agenda. Could you direct us to the page where that we would have it for the Law and Rules Policy Committee meeting?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the main agenda, the main presentation that includes the agenda would be tomorrow's presentation for the full board. And we actually don't have anything before you on your iPads to review. This is an opportunity to talk about things that we either have in the pipeline as well as those coming up, any policies that you think we need to work on. I do, since I've got the opportunity to talk, want to update those that were here during the Continuing Education Committee. Legal went ahead and looked at it deeper, and then Maria, before having to leave us, emailed me the information on the rule that is in the pipeline. And so that's why we're all not remembering all the pieces. It is the rule on Chapter 0120-05 that includes the continuing education. So I'm happy to hand it out to the group now, and then also tomorrow. Obviously, this does live in the pipeline, so if we needed changes, it would have to go all the way back through. It was pulled for minor changes, I understand, either through the Attorney General or Secretary of State. Usually those changes, unless they're substantive, wouldn't come back to the full board because they would be grammatical in nature, that kind of thing. But since we've all forgotten about them, because I think these were started on before my time even, then it, I think, is well worth everyone looking at, taking home. We can always still address it tomorrow so that before they continue the path in the pipeline, we know that it's what we want.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But you can hold on to it for tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Roxana. Yeah, we certainly need to get reacquainted with this, since this is quite a few weeks old. We'll just say weeks, and I think a lot of this has to do with the from what I've gleaned, that is from the a lot of the continuing education issues can be addressed in tomorrow's meeting. So I don't know that unless there's something in particular you might, as you're perusing through this, and we'll take a little time to do that might want to be put on the table today, that'd be great. Otherwise, I think we have a question.
Well, I didn't know if we wanted to skim this real quick and see if there was any discussion, but also, is this the appropriate time to ask about rulemaking for our definitions? Okay. because I understand we need to have an explanation, if I'm correct, Frank, whether or not it's going to be rulemaking or what?
A law?
A law. So is that something you want to address, Stuart, or is that something we need to get
And I may
get back?
be
I
able
don't know.
to
I'm just
touch on
asking.
it. We addressed it at the engineering committee meeting yesterday because they went through their 4.0 version, and they asked legal counsel, both Stuart that's here and Maria, and I think our conclusion is that it can move through rules because the laws definitely give that authority to be able to have the definitions in them. Therefore, that would be the preferred method. And if there is a change 5, hopefully 10 years down the road or whenever, it's always easier to touch as well.
That's the definite method. Okay. That's where I thought we were, but then I keep hearing different, what ifs, so I just wanted to make sure. So.
Now, this would be a great time, and I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, for those things that we have in the pipeline, maybe to at least enumerate them, such as, I know we're going to work on some things through NCWS to ask about a master's degree and engineering pieces, but now, this would be a time together to give us that food for thought of what other things do we think need to be worked on in the rules. And if we are discussing laws, then they go through the organizations, but a good time for everybody to think about for 2020.
I think that's what you said yesterday, of having a rulemaking hearing on the definitions is a good thing, because then it gets distributed to everybody, it gets a proper amount of vetting from all the, are we looking, so we can do a rulemaking hearing, I don't want to say at any time, but there's no calendar restrictions except for notice restrictions.
Correct. It's
right?
the number of dates to notify, yes.
So are we trying to look at possibly doing something with the definitions in the spring? Because by the time you look at noticing and all that and stuff, I mean, it seems like February to whatever may be about the next, I mean, I'm just asking.
I can't even give you a timeline right now. I mean, we'll push it as quickly as it can, but I can't tell you it's going to be spring or.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I think we kind of need to give ourselves, even if it's an artificial deadline, a little bit of a deadline. You guys are ready to go. You're not 100% sure. You're never going to be ready to go. We're sort of ready to go.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is, I think if we do this, we need to have something substantial enough in the rulemaking hearing, so it doesn't just need to be the interior designer rule definition, and then 6 months later we do the engineering even if we do 2 at a time or something, or 3 and then wait. You know what I'm saying? It needs to be something with a little bit more than just 1 or 2
I'd
things.
love for it to happen before my last board meeting, as far as an introduction on rulemaking, so that may not happen, but that's what
I don't know.
hope
I
for.
mean, I don't, yeah.
Yeah.
And April might be a realistic time frame, and I'm just, because we want to talk about date, the February meeting's definitely too soon would be my gut. Simply because if tomorrow we can come up with, is 5.0 for the engineers good enough? Maria wants to start running with that and moving those and start to review them to have some time to see if is it too long? Is it, start looking at that perspective just at least once with some time. And we may do the same thing now that we've got the landscape architect version, and I know we have Susan's for interior design. Just start that process. Talk about it again in December. But April might happen that way at least. And if not, June, I think that doesn't mean that they're going to go through the pipeline, but get them to where the board has motioned that this version is a good version. And we can then start the process to make it open to the public, to set a date, to have the university start presenting it to different individuals, the organizations. Is that kind of the date or thought you had?
Yeah, I mean, she certainly got the definition and got a better sense for kind of where we are, but that's in my back of my mind, kind of a close date, because we talked about December possibly having ours.
Yeah, I was going to say
more or less ready.
that we had felt like earlier that from the engineer's definition, and like you said, Susan's is ready, and Blair and I have talked offline, and he's going to present his, and then we'll see if it's something that they feel good about by December. But I would say, I still feel good that at the December meeting, we will have at least something that our disciplines feel is a very, very, very good push-forward document for 3 of the 4. And as long as the architects think that it's reasonable that you guys are going to want a definition and that you feel your national organization is still moving in that direction, I think we could just have a placeholder for, can we not? And just say the architects, for rulemaking notice purposes, that the architects also intend to have a definition.
I think they would have to have a definition.
Do they,
put in.
that's what I'm asking, do they have to have they have to have a definition to put in the notice of the rulemaking?
Because, and Stuart will correct me, but you can't just file for notice without having the document that's
Okay.
going to be noticed.
Okay.
So that would have to be worked out. So if in December we've got what the board feels
Three of
is
the four.
comfortable of 3 of the 4, then we internally, Maria, Stuart, everyone in legal and administration will move forward with that, and maybe that will only take a month or 2. And in February, we may be able to post the date and determine when that can be.
And I guess, Stuart, I know that you can't speak with authority relative to a hard date, but I'm just curious as to what are the issues that come into play relative to us being able to get some kind of a time frame from legal, suggested time frame.
And I would think like a suggested time frame after the board passes it, says ready to go, then you're looking at probably 6 to 9 months. Because it has to go through certain agencies, and there's going to be a lot of eyes
I understand.
put on this document, so.
Well, and I've asked repeatedly, and it's just because I'm ignorant. I'm sure that that's my problem, but I just don't understand the process. I never have understood the process. It seems to be a little bit of black magic. So anything you can do to educate us so that we understand the process better, especially me, I always appreciate.
I could probably do that at a later time.
Okay. Can we put that on the agenda for December?
Yes.
How about let's do that? That'd be great. Okay, thank you.
Now, what is it exactly we're going to do in December? I'm taking
Okay,
notes.
I'd like to address the architect's question.
Yes, please. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. We think in December,
3 or 4.
3 of the 4
Right.
will be ready to give to staff for the purpose of saying, this is the definition that the 3 disciplines
Okay,
want to
all
use. And then they can start helping us perceive the path forward on that,
From the 3 or 4.
from the 3 of the 4.
Because I'm just trying to put together the sequencing, especially given what we just heard about the 6 to 9 months, because we're 6 months out getting ours.
Right.
If what we have is approved at the national level, it's what we want to introduce as our definition.
Right.
Because we're all on board with this from a national standpoint.
Right.
So we will be ready to submit that as soon as, I don't know what this board meeting is in June versus our national board meeting, so.
So it could be a parallel, or it could be a 2 months difference, or, yeah.
They're going to be very close. If we can get it before and introduce it, I don't think we're going to be able to. So it'd probably be in August.
And frankly, I guess, do you think that, because don't they present it in February? I mean, not February, is it March? Whenever that one, isn't that when it comes to the,
That's their schedule.
okay.
Frank,
I
can you
just wondered if
Frank,
I just wondered if we should get, do you think we ought to get what's being proposed to them so they could review that with everybody, or you'd rather wait till afterward?
I think they would probably rather we wait until after.
All right.
And as an example, one of they're looking for, they've put out a tentative definition. They're looking for feedback. And I know one of the things they're dealing with, and all of y'all probably to some extent, is the construction administration or construction supervision part of the practice of architecture. And if you just require it, then anybody that's out there that's reviewing construction that's not a professional or under their direct supervision is practicing architecture without a license. And so part of what I'm seeing that they have now and they're looking for feedback on is how do they, what services would be allowed in construction administration that doesn't require a registered professional or under their supervision. And that's I don't know if y'all have dealt with that at all, but that is a question, like even from engineering, is construction administration. Is that part of the practice of engineering? If you say it is, then are there limitations on who has to be registered to do that? And that seems to be the main thing that they're dealing with. And
I think on some of those issues, we're probably going to end up having to have a policy to address some of those things like we do on commissioning. You know, what level of construction administration or construction observation or whatever is considered engineering or architecture versus not. And I think, though, the sentence needs to be in the definition, but maybe we as a board then have to take that a little further and say, okay, if you're just counting widgets, then that's not engineering. But if you're out there actually making sure the welds on a beam are good or doing some whatever, then
they can reinforce it too.
Yeah, then that may go to engineering, and we may have to put a policy. We've kind of had to do that with commissioning and a couple other things where we've had to kind of break that down into a little bit more finite subset, because I don't think in the definition, if you go to all the different permutations, I mean, the definition would be 9 miles long, and it wouldn't make any sense. So
that's the other thing. How do you do that and make it, brief? Yeah, and my thought is, and this is as far as bringing it to legal to be put into being a rule, is if we've got a thoroughly reviewed and vetted national model law that's being accepted by many states, it would probably be a lot easier for them to review than something we just made up on our own and handed it to them.
let me say one quick thing too about just the timing and what we're talking about. And I'm going to use April as our date, even though April may not be our date.
In June for 2020, I apologize, I think you had asked me, so I don't know when that meeting is, but our meeting, if we vote on these dates for June, would be June 3rd and 4th.
I guess the annual meeting's after that.
Okay, because that's right early, yeah. Go ahead.
So the 6 to 9 months is the time it takes to get, after we've ratified the rule, to get through the process. So if it's in April, and let's say we approved it in April as a board and everything's good, then if all things are good, it would take 6 to 9 months to get through the AG's office, to get through all the other things that has to go. So your rule wouldn't start until August, and then it would still take 6 to 9 months. So, I mean, I think we're probably, that 6 to 9 months is just how long it takes. And then ours may come back twice. We don't know we don't know what it's going to do. So it's possible we could be a couple years off between. Yours may come through faster than ours.
I was going to say, or they could merge.
Who knows?
They could merge at some point.
Yeah, but it's not 6 to 9 months by the time it's done. It's just.
Well, I guess that it's the pleasure of the board. How do we want to spread them up and do them like that, or do them all at once? I mean, we've been working on this for 5 years at least, trying to figure out what we're going to do, and since you're saying that the architects are holding it up, I do remember the engineers were the ones that initially held it up. But I don't have a problem with it being with other disciplines on this board being before ours. Ours just happens to be in that process of, I'm fine with that because.
And as long as y'all are fine with that, I think we should continue to push every chance we get toward the finish line, simply because, like Robert said, we never know when we might get stopped on something.
Correct. And is there a comment is there an issue, do you think, from your perspective of us doing it that way? Is it more cumbersome or just?
I can't even. I don't think so.
Okay. I didn't think it would be. I mean, it's just a matter of timing when it happens. I mean, we're going to be rocking through this process for years anyway.
And I think, so I think early on, maybe shortly after I came on board, I did mention that if you have too many rules in the pipeline, it can be confusing, because it can be confusing even when we head to the Hill and we're answering, because they see you again and go, wait a minute, wasn't that the rule you brought 2 months ago? What's this different? Why are we, and so we'd have an explanation, obviously. They're different disciplines, and this is how it was carried out, and that may be fine. But if the rule timing, for example, if we work on other things as well, such as within engineers, I know we're looking at the experience, progressive experience. Can that be in the same package for the progressive experience as the definition, simply because it's the same industry? Just things to think about. It can be less confusing for those that are thinking about the rules in the pipeline. But that would be the only thing. And then the only other thing that comes to my mind is, since we're doing rulemaking hearing for the definitions, because we know it does impact the future licensees, the current licensees, in defining what they can do, we're going to do full rulemaking with people coming to the meeting and answering and asking questions and submitting. That may pose the question, well, wait a minute, why isn't the architect here? And again, we would have an answer that the 4 disciplines have different procedures. That's it.
Right, and I think we're fine with that, aren't we? Architects, so it just makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right, let's not get behind the curve, let's stay ahead of the curve.
And I think the rules are going to be enough. I mean, there's an architecture that it's, hopefully they won't get confused, because, I mean, they're talking about 2 separate things, even though they're still the same thing, but they're 2 different areas. And by the way, we were playing rope-a-dope with you guys, so just to, anyway. Quick question. You said the definition of progressive experience?
Yes. We've got that chart for the engineers that log their experience. We were going to try to define it in rules.
Okay.
And
where is that, or is that?
Right now, it's on our website, and Wanda Phillips points all of our engineers that are looking to apply toward that, so that they incorporate their progressive experience in it. When we met at some point with Tony, he recommended that we move that into rules. So we haven't started it at all. I think the last time we talked about it might have been the April or June meeting, and I had sent that to our engineering committee members so that you could see what we have online to start developing it. And I can do that again after this meeting.
Yeah, I think we need to, I don't know that we've vetted that
Right.
as an engineering committee, and that's probably something that we need to look at again
Okay.
To get that started, because I don't think we've started that yet.
We didn't talk about it yesterday.
We didn't talk about it yesterday, right? You're right. I remember us talking about it in the past,
Right.
but I didn't know where it
But we
was.
didn't pick it up and carry it.
Yeah, I don't remember that one. Okay.
One little comment on the construction administration. The definition will be not a recommendation that it be included in your ability to practice in that state, from what I've read. I mean, that Alabama, Colorado, Illinois, certain states, you have to do CA. You have to do it. Or, you're in violation of being an architect. So, but that's a law in that state. So we're not going down that path. We're just defining what we do. So it's not going to be that cumbersome once we get because the whole nation will be on page with it.
But I think, like I said, if you have construction administration in your definition, that means different things to different people. Like some other parts of our definition may mean, and we may end up having to do a policy that says, okay, this construction administration that does this is engineering or architecture. Construction engineering administration that does this is not considered, and maybe have to split that out a little bit. But we need it in our definition to say that's something that we do, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's,
Well, but in the current version of the definition document right now, we do not call out construction administration as a phrase that is engineering. We talk in terms of tasks, and those tasks in support of inspection of construction for compliance with plans and specs, et cetera. But we don't call it CA because of what he just said. We don't want to just say, if you're doing CA, you better be licensed. Because some CA could be construed as administrative, some is actual engineering or architecture.
My point exactly. These are very specific per these states.
Right.
and it's very cumbersome. Louisiana, got them, good Lord. Louisiana's a whole nother world, but it just, we'll be careful not to make that, like you say, in part of it. Okay.
I still think we're in pretty good place with all this. So. But it would be really helpful to understand the timelines that we're looking at, and if we get to a point where things can start to merge, that's even better. If we have two different documents moving forward at one time, like I said, avoiding conflicts of misunderstanding with legislators or administration officials, we don't want them to think that we're being overly administrative in our attempts to get good law passed. But it ain't easy. I know.
Hey. Okay. Anything else? Do we have any other topics?
Other than, are we going to address this?
Oh, yeah,
tomorrow?
well, do you want, I don't know if anybody's had time to peruse it since we've been in this discussion, but do you want to take a few minutes to?
Or should we just wait and get a?
Should
we get a report tomorrow from and then, I mean, I guess it's after this.
Well, I think Roxana's, if I understood her correctly, maybe we could take this and review it this evening.
Feel free, absolutely.
And then it could be, if we
Because
have
I made
any-
enough copies for everybody for tomorrow.
Yeah.
And just so we know, this right now is in the pipeline, meaning it doesn't have to have anything else done. We now are saying, once again, because we said yesterday we couldn't remember it,
Yeah.
it's moving forward. Everybody knows that it's moving forward.
Right
If
right
you
now,
do
we'd like
make a
this to be an
change,
informational piece,
Right.
not something for a future
necessary.
debate.
But if today or tonight you all look at it and go, oh, something has changed in conversations and we need to make a change, we still could, because it hasn't moved down the pipe, but it would require us starting all over again and going back through the Secretary of State, Attorney General, any change of that sort.
And can you remind us of why it was that it got, what speed bump did we hit? I don't remember.
It had nothing to do with the board. My understanding when we talked about it today was that administratively it didn't go to the right office as it should have with all the supporting documents. So it was pulled and kind of didn't follow, like you said, all these tracks it has to follow with the correct backup and justifications and answered pieces. It missed something and was sent back.
So tomorrow, when we introduce this, I guess, are we going to be making some kind of a motion to reintroduce this, or I'm not, or is this just for
great question.
Conversation only, or?
I think because at the Continuing Education Committee, we discussed this and were confused as to, is it already the rule or not? I think we do need to all remember it and say, yes, this is still what we want. I don't think we need a motion because it's in the pipeline. It's just sort of still sat in the pipeline. This 6 months to 9, I've had a rule live almost 2 years. Obviously controversial rules, right? But so it could. And it wasn't necessarily controversial. I think the fact that all the T's weren't crossed got it kicked back, and between attorneys changing and different things, it just sat. So it's great that it came up yesterday because
It'll linger out there for another year.
Yeah, but we wouldn't need to do anything, so hopefully it still looks good.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, Tony came back with this last year, and they said that not allowing carryover hours was too restrictive. Do you remember that?
I do.
Okay. And I was thinking why, that was the reason why it didn't move forward as well. That was something they did not want. They felt like it was too restrictive, and so they wanted us to take that out. And that part of the conversation I remember because they talked about interior designers allowed carryover hours, but the architects were not, and they wanted the architects to allow carryover hours. So that's still in here, that they don't allow them. So that was what I understood that you all needed to take out. So anyway.
Is that on basic requirements B? Is
Yes.
that where that is?
Well, it's under A as well,
I'm sorry, A and B?
that they do want you all to allow carryover hours.
Somehow or other, I missed that part. They want
May
the
not have been-
architects to,
Allow carryover hours. It doesn't say, they didn't say that you had to have, that only having health, safety, and welfare was wrong, but they did want you to allow carryover hours. So they were just trying to keep it from being restrictive. And I know Tony's about to leave, and that was last year, but when they compared it to us, I perked up, more, so, anyway.
So what we wanted as architects was to have 12 CEUs, there were HSW, to fall in line with what the other states are doing.
Correct.
Now, some of them, per year, I'm sorry, and some of the other states are not quite at 12, they might be 14 or whatever they are, but they're HSW hours. And then they have, with the exception of a couple of states, eliminated carryover hours, which because of some of the comments of, well, I just couldn't get around to it this year. Well, that's, in my opinion, that is not a good comment. That's not a good reason. I couldn't get around to it this year. It's, you're going to practice, you need to do what you need to practice. And that's why I wanted to eliminate the carryover hours, and then there was some...
Isn't that what this does?
That's what
And
this
this
does.
But I'm just saying, that's why we arrived at that point.
Could be.
Let me tell you.
This is
I think
2021, carryover hours go away. That's what
So let me say what I think maybe memory-wise. I think the reason that it got kicked back is we didn't allow a grace period to do to eliminate the carryover. That's why 2021's in here.
3-year period.
Right, because we basically, the way the rule was originally written,
Okay.
it said, tomorrow afternoon, we're not having any carryover hours, and that would be bad because you had people in the pipeline, people that couldn't make things.
Exactly.
I think that's what you remember, because this rule is the one that's been all the way through a lot of the process. So this has to be the way it is.
Yes.
And we're not changing anything, and it clearly says no carryover after 2021, but I think we basically said, whatever, if it was in 2016 or something, right?
This started.
Maybe we said in 2017 it has to be, and he came back and said, wait a minute, you got to give people a little bit of wiggle room.
Thank you.
To get there. I'm almost positive that
You're
was
right, and that's the reason.
That's
I
it.
think it got kicked back and got
Almost
lost in the
positive.
shuffle was because of that grace period or
Yeah.
sunset or whatever you want to call it. But it's where I think we should be.
Good, good. So tomorrow with the continuing education committee, this can be definitely, but it looks like it's where we want it to be and can just move. That would be great.
Let me ask a question. Because of the delays and all of this, are we going to need to extend it to allow the appropriate amount of time that they wanted originally? Okay.
21 is still that deadline.
No, that's what we
Yeah, but
submitted.
if the rulemaking doesn't happen until next year, and they wanted a 2-year grace period, then we're down to 1 year again. So that's just why I'm bringing it up.
Oh,
So,
okay.
Okay.
Should maybe the language be 3 years from the date of approval? I don't know. I mean,
But to change the language, then you have to start anew, right?
no, let's just leave it like
Have to
that.
start over.
Well,
So
we're just
this,
gonna-
this right here is
Now-
ready to go to,
Yeah, let's
I
leave it like
believe,
it
to
is.
the rulemaking hearing.
Okay.
We've gone through all the other steps,
You
it's
can
just
still do it
because of
1 year.
administrative reasons.
Even if they don't.
We like it the way it reads, thank you.
Okay.
I'm great.
Good point. Thank you, though, but it gets us back to what we wanted to do. We're not going to change it. I'm not going to vote to change it, so. You do whatever you want to, sir, Mr. Chairman.
We have 50 or 60 hours every year anyway. So.
of those. All right, that's,
Yeah.
if that's what we have, and I think, hopefully that there won't be any major issues with it, but Continuing Education Committee and now the Legal Committee, I think we're all on the same page. So who goes first? Continuing Education tomorrow?
Yes, and you're right behind. Law is right after continuing education.
So we'll have the groundwork and we can continue it on?
Absolutely.
All right, very good.
Absolutely. In an ideal world, if this doesn't have objections, there's nothing to do. It's going straight to set a date for rulemaking hearing, and we're good. So, anything else that we had before we move to the next committee, or are we?
I don't have anything. Does anyone have anything else? Okay, I recommend we adjourn.
Finance will start here in 1 minute.
So I'm back and great.
Thank you. We are on the record for the Finance Committee meeting, part of the Architects and Engineers, and notice was posted on the website on September 25th for this committee meeting as well. And if it's okay with you, Chairman Blair, I'll go ahead and do roll call.
Yes, please.
Rick Thompson,
Present.
Susan Ballard.
Here.
Robert Campbell.
Here.
Blair Parker.
Here.
And Alton has had to leave us for this meeting, and so we still have quorum. I will turn it over to you, sir.
Sounds great. Can you remind me what page this would be on our iPads?
Yes, so we have nothing specific for us to review, as in there's no proposal for fee changes, fee increases, fortunately, nothing of that sort. So the main board meeting document for tomorrow with financial numbers starts on page 48. Yes. Page 48 is the fiscal closure that went through June. We had 2 adjustments of final distributions of numbers. So the number that you see at the far right, ending balance of $70,264, is that right? For all of 2019 is obviously good, but it does show that we're using the money wisely. It's not a huge excess either. So, and then you will see the final reserves at the bottom of $2,151,279,000.
So, okay, that's $2,151,279,000. Okay, all right.
And is that considered 2 years operating cost, or was that just under 2 years of operating costs for the department?
Right under.
Okay.
It's not quite 2.
Okay.
So in an ideal world, when we go before our legislators and talk about excess money, they would not. As a matter of fact, when I was, and at the full meeting, we'll talk about the sunset hearing, they were not concerned with us having too much money at all, because that's where it would have come up and they would have said, are you lowering your fees? I don't think we have too much. I think that reserve is covering anything like this.
Many years ago, I think someone from accounting said that it would be good to have 2 years reserve.
That's correct.
So
They're being a little bit less conservative, I guess would be the right word, and 2 years is the most you want to have. You want to be between 1.5 years to 2 is kind of what they're saying now, if you remember the meeting, so.
Anything else in here that stands out to anybody else as you review this?
The thing that kind of stands out to me is that our discussion with the grants of another 50,000 is not going to impact, not going to drop us below some threshold, and keeps us right, between a year and 2 years and 23 months or somewhere in that neighborhood. So I think it should give us some confidence to do that and move forward.
do I need to make a motion that we ask for $50,000 through the Finance Committee, or?
It would not hurt at all. I think
Okay.
both committees have the absolute right, have discussed it, and are on board. I think that's a great piece as well.
So, too.
So I'd like to make a motion that the Grants Committee be given an additional $50,000 due to the increase of students within the educational institutions in the state of Tennessee in the amount of $50,000 to be distributed through the 2020 grant season. So,
Motion, second. Do we have a second?
I second that.
Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, we'll vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. We're all in favor, unanimous approval.
If I could make a note, and it's not necessarily that it's a correction, but it may be, so the 2020 grants that the grant committee worked on yesterday are only for 350. We can't increase
So then
them.
2021.
Exactly, it'd be
I'd like to
2021.
amend my motion for 2021.
So we cannot add that to the current grants?
Correct.
No,
Because the
it's
budget is-
already preset. That was
preset.
predetermined.
Okay.
But this would be timely, I believe, because finance and the way fiscal kind of looks at things, we've got deadlines for those, so I think we're like right there. I think October is kind of when we have to define those lines, and so between Jennifer and I, will talk to the Assistant Commissioner probably this week, if not early next week, to make sure that this can go in the pipelines to be added for the numbers that we need for budget purposes for 2021. That way, it starts in that cycle for the grant.
One of the things, and I started to mention, I know we were running out of time in our meeting with the deans, which we always tend to do, but you heard over and over and over again how appreciative they were and how valuable those grants were to what they were trying to get accomplished and how essential it was to their budgeting and improvement process. You know, it would be really nice if some of them or all of them would write us letters saying that. That way, if we ever have to provide justification or substantiation for that what we're doing is actually making a meaningful impact, we'd have it.
In here.
Good.
Almost every one of them thank us for the funds, and
Absolutely.
Good, and that's great. I haven't seen that, but that's wonderful.
And I remember last year when the universities presented after the meeting, the meetings of their presentations, which is another reason that it really is good to be sort of in a room where we're videotaping and we're streaming live, everybody gets to hear it. We were able also to say to those that couldn't read the proposals or have time, if you watch those presentations, they are phenomenal, and they kind of address everything.
I was sort of sorry that we weren't live streaming the luncheon today so that everybody else could hear how valuable that asset was to those colleges. Thank you.
It was a very good session. Okay, so we have made the recommendation for the additional $50,000, and that's been approved. Is there anything else for the Finance Committee? I have one additional thing, and I'm not sure where it fits, frankly, in the overall, and that is having our retreat here in this building. We used to leave the site and go to a state park or a university, and I believe we pulled back from that due to expenses. And I really think there are some very positive reasons to get out of, nothing about this building, but to go other places. As far as looking at overall finances, I can't imagine us going to a Paris Landing State Park and staying there is much more expensive than us paying for hotels here in the center of Nashville, Tennessee.
I heartily second that. I think when we were at sites or at destinations, I think there were a lot fewer distractions, and I always felt like we got a lot more done. There was a lot more interaction, and I agree with Blair that we're paying for people to come to Nashville, and the rooms associated with staying in Nashville wouldn't be what they would be at either somewhere around the University of Memphis or at, like Blair said, Paris Landing State Park or Fall Creek Falls State Park. I think it could, in fact, be maybe a money saver, not an additional expense, or not much of an additional expense.
If I could add, well, first, welcome all tonight, Mark, that you were here, so thank you. I'm so glad you're with us. So one of the issues, and in money is not a huge difference, although there is a cost if we go to a park, and you all will get to decide that with Jennifer now. So, but it will be at the board's discretion. We could have that conversation. But one of the pieces would be paying for legal to go. So you will be paying for 2 additional attorneys to go, as well as the executive director. And so when I compared from the previous year, it was more expensive to go to the park. And I think there are feeding folks for 3 meals, additional folks, as opposed to maybe all of the days here for 3 meals. But the cost is not huge necessarily. I think one of the situations is the transparency in being on the record and streaming live, which we have in this building, and I can't think of a way where you're going to do it that way. I know I wouldn't want to be responsible for making sure that we're streaming well at a park, because we do have other programs that have to travel by statute. They have to go to the different parts of the state. And almost all of them have at some point said, nothing worked. I ended up with a meeting that recorded for an hour, and now you're kind of stuck. So that piece is real. You would not be able to have the breakout sessions and all the recording that you can have here. But other than that, it would be at the board's discretion.
Seems like an opportunity that we can hopefully work through. But Susan?
By the way, the state has just authorized an increase in the stipend for hotels to $223 a night. So that means where we've been paying $179, now we're going to pay $223 for the same hotel. So I know it was $69, I think, at one of the state parks we stayed at, Now, the room's not nice, but, there is some increases that we're going to be looking at for staying in Nashville. So that was all I wanted to mention.
Thank you. If there were, and I think too, if there are issues or concerns about the audio-visual capabilities of the state parks, the other things that we've done a number of times as state at college campus, or right around college campuses, and each of the locations that we've stayed, those universities have pretty good audio-visual capabilities that we should be able to live stream from there. But again, that would be part of maybe the evaluation process about where we go. I know before we were trying to go to, we tried to visit every university, which I really enjoyed because it also gave us an opportunity to speak to the students there. But again, that traditionally or typically would be a little less expensive than coming to downtown Nashville maybe.
Robert?
I just kind of want to second that. I think maybe the state park thing, I understand, because a lot of state parks don't have extremely good Wi-Fi and all that, which you would need to do that. However, a UTC, UT Knoxville, ETSU, University of Memphis, several around here, that I think being on their campus, being able to kind of talk to the students a little bit, like you said, plus it just kind of gets everybody out of that place. And I think they all, let's talk to them and see. I think, several of them do have great audio-visual capabilities, and they stream meetings all the time. They stream all kinds of stuff. So I would like for us to, I would like for our new executive director to see how many things have we put on you already. You feel good? You feel like you're part of the? You feel like you're part of the harassment yet?
If she doesn't show up tomorrow, we'll know why.
And this isn't new. We had touched on it just briefly with all.
But I think maybe just asking them what their audio-visual capabilities are, which I think they're, and room capabilities. The ability to kind of sit around a table versus sitting around these things. Sometimes you're right, and just some meeting space outside where we can sit around in the halls and talk a little bit better is a little bit more conducive sometimes to some of the conversations that we need to have. So anyway, that's just a suggestion, because I do agree with you. I think audio-visual from a state park would be a disaster, because you have to go to certain places inside the state park and hold your hand this way and your phone this way to be able to get an email. So I understand that. But these colleges and campuses certainly have got really good facilities for that.
Because I'm new to this and am not familiar with where all you have been recently, are there any areas that you have been in the last few years or something that you want to say we need to go somewhere new as we start to investigate?
I don't think we've been to West Tennessee in a little while.
Last time we went to Memphis maybe in 2011.
Yeah. I think we were in Nashville. We were in Vanderbilt a couple years ago, I think. Yeah.
Nashville schools, arguably, we're going to have the same issue with the hotel rooms. So,
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of other schools out there.
Sure.
So.
And then you've got, we were in Knoxville architecture.
That was
Yes.
before 2011.
Chattanooga about 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know that we've been in
When I first-
reiteration? Okay.
I know when I first came, 2009 was my first year on the board. We were at Lipscomb University that year. So it's been a while. But that's, again, here in Nashville.
And Lipscomb had invited us this year, but the thought of us traveling at some point, I was told, no, that won't work right now. We've got a new assistant commissioner, a new deputy commissioner, a new commissioner. So this is an ideal opportunity, and if this committee is looking at the finances and has a motion for us to go, that's what Jennifer will run with, is a motion for the October meeting to be held in a different part of the state.
So I'm gonna make that motion, if that's okay, that we evaluate going to college campuses that have the ability to live stream, meeting facilities to conduct our normal business, as well as other sessions that we may want to do. And, obviously cost is going to be a component of it, but I remember when we went to Memphis, hotel was right across the street, and I don't think it was very expensive at
It
all.
was part of the University of Memphis. They have that hospitality.
They didn't
and
have the
everything.
hospitality thing.
All in.
So, I mean, I think a lot of the universities have got facilities close by, and we're talking about, a few more hotel rooms, but I don't think that's going to be a terrible expense to us. Does that sound like a good motion?
Second.
Can you restate that motion?
I would ask that we evaluate universities that have the ability to live stream successfully, have the right kind of meeting space for both our board meeting and our breakout sessions, and have hotel facilities that are cost effective for our boards to meet and be able to be mobile at some point.
A motion
Second.
and a second. Discussion?
Could I make a friendly amendment to that? I would also like to include the state parks, because we are doing a lot of work on our state parks now, upgrading them, and if there is an opportunity that meets our needs.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to just limit it to the university.
That's perfectly fine. State parks can be added to that. Like I said, I didn't know how much that was going on, but that'd be good.
Thank you.
Susan, you good with the?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. We've had discussion. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous approval. Thank you. Anything else for the Finance Committee?
And this is another question. Obviously, we had the fee reduction
2018?
2 years ago.
July.
Another thing is just to look, I don't know if now is the right time to look at our fee structure on anything, I don't know. But if there's something that staff sees that's out there that, hey, we're not doing this, I think we got and Wanda, I think you sent the email out about, are we using that other sheet, right? I mean, in our WADN, if you see something that maybe from a fee standpoint or something else that we need to talk about, that's either a fee reduction or just an efficiency thing that's kind of obvious, I think, especially on the fee side, because it's been a couple years, I think, since we kind of looked through, and maybe nothing's changed, but maybe we've gotten rid of something else that allows us to look at our fees as well.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment, and again, I'm not on this committee, but a sore point with me has been, we lowered the fees for Tennessee, but we lowered it for everybody. Now, I've heard that's so we'll be equitable, but I just paid $350 to renew my Mississippi fee, and that's for out-of-state. In-state's $250. So if I don't know why we can't be unequitable with out-of-state, since everybody else is. But,
Friendly place to do business.
be worth looking into. But I don't mind Tennessee's being $50 and everybody else being $250. But that's just me.
I would like to support what Frank just said, because, being licensed in 22 states, at the time we did this, there was some movement from administration about trying to promote business and things like that. and I'm not against promoting business in the state of Tennessee, but if you're coming here to work, there's a reason you're coming here, and if it's another $100, you don't need to be coming here. I mean, it's not equitable for us to have to pay in Mississippi, of which I'm licensed as well, because it's an out-of-state fee. There's a processing issue, and I know it's not overwhelmingly high in the state, but there is an additional fee, an additional amount required to do that, from what I understand. So, and I was never for that the reduction of fees for out of state, and I just don't like that, So if they want to come to Tennessee and do business, I want them to come to Tennessee and do business, and I think they need to do it from an equitable standpoint. Thank you.
So that's a great question, though. I mean, how much an out-of-state applicant, and by and large, do we expend extra time, effort from a processing standpoint? I mean, and even if it's $50 or whatever, that's still time that we're not recouping in an equitable way. So, I mean, it seems like you should be able to charge for what time it takes you. I'm just a question if we are, if we're not. I don't know.
Further comments, discussion? I entertain a motion to adjourn. That's right.
I'll make the motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a great question. Good topic. I would like to know how many states differ and how many are the same. I always like it when they're the same when I'm applying out of state, so there's some of that going. But I wouldn't want to be like, if there were only 2 or 3 states that differed, I wouldn't want to see us change and do that. It would be nice to know if, half of them or more differ in fees.
And if we can, and along those lines, I mean, if we could just reach out to them and have that discussion and saying, look, our fees are here. Why are yours so high? I mean, at least I'll have that discussion, right? I mean, if you're paying $50 here and $300 somewhere else, I mean, that's insane.
And they don't give out grants in Mississippi. I don't know what they do with all the money, to be honest with you. Probably goes in the general fund.
I just had a question. Roxana, you obviously are on multiple boards. Are there those discrepancies between states with other professions, or is it just?
Oh, the fees vary between professions, between Tennessee and immensely, yes, and other states, absolutely. But I think overall, one of my programs had to reduce fees because of too much excess funding since I've been on board, and the hope was to reduce more for the Tennessee residents, similar to your conversation, and we did not. The fee that was reduced was for initial applicants. It was a big chunk of a fee, but the concept there was to welcome initial people coming in, both internal and in-state that went through the training process and grew, and those moving in. So it was across the board to welcome everyone. And then the renewal fee was reduced a little bit for, again, everyone, regardless if your home state was Tennessee or not. And that passed very well. Not to say that this wouldn't if you decided to make a difference in the fee, but.
I think of another board that'd be a good example. I'm just going to throw out land surveyors because that's the first one that comes to mind. So if they're out of state and they want a license here, they pay the same fee as a Tennessee resident?
Yes.
Okay. So there's no discrepancy. Okay.
And some programs do have a discrepancy.
Okay.
I mean, they do, but land surveyors do not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Further discussion? We have, I believe, a motion on the floor to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
I thought that was a suggestion. I didn't think that was a real motion. I thought you were pulling a Rick moment and just saying, I'm tired of this, let's quit.
Throw me off the air.
Yeah.
I actually arrested him for
We are on the record. This is the Interior Design Committee meeting, and it is starting at 2:35. This was properly noticed on September the 25th. And Chairman Ballard, if it's okay with you, I'll do a quick roll call. Susan Ballard?
Here.
Frank Wagster?
Here.
Kathy Ware?
Here.
All present. I will turn it over to you, Susan. Thank you.
I appreciate everyone's participation in the luncheon today. I thought it worked very well for everyone to have an opportunity to give some feedback, and thank you all for your input, Frank and Kathy. I did have an opportunity to speak to David Matthews with UT in regards to their grant proposal. It's a wording issue. It has not been distributed, or will not be distributed as it's written. The honorarium is something that if there's $10 left over, that's what they got. So they're going to reword that. So so from the interior design side on that, they understand, our viewpoint on it, and they're going to take care of that. Also, I hope that our, attention to professionals calling themselves interior architects was also clear. And so part of what I wanted to bring up, and thank you for being here, Rick, is if you all had any other thoughts or suggestions how we can make sure that the general public understands that they can't call themselves that, since we do not have it as a licensed profession in Tennessee. And so trying to start with the grassroots of the programs, to me, is one hope. Discussing it at state meetings is another, which I have an opportunity to next week. But I just wondered if y'all had any other feedback. So,
You think the interior architecture students are aware enough of the situation? And I know you cited 2 examples of people graduated that now they're practicing interior architecture.
what they had done, these are people who graduated over 20 years ago. Because the name of the school changed, they thought the name of the profession changed, which was the domino that we were trying to avoid in the first place.
Well, they weren't students, they were...
They were not students, they were professionals. And so after conversations with them and explaining, they both have changed their websites, they've changed their, hopefully their business cards. But anyway.
The only way, and you kind of hit on it, I think, the only way I can see people will get the message is to file a complaint and maybe give them a letter of caution and get them to take the because even when we sat down with all the groups, as you remember, a few years back and said, please don't do this. It wasn't 2 weeks later, they were all changing their name to interior architecture.
Well,
and so they just, unless there's a consequence, they don't seem to
I think after today's meeting,
to want to abide by it.
Stating that we can't, hold hands anymore, we're going to have to, enforce it, It's their responsibility, in my opinion, to spread it to the alumni. Maybe somebody else has a different viewpoint, but that's, to me, their responsibility, so.
Well, is it possible? I saw a lot of people's eyes pop out of their head when you said make an example of somebody at lunch. And, that's last resort. We don't want to, that's obviously not something we want to do, but, golly, how many times are you going to tell people? Is it possible that we could send a letter to the deans that are in charge of these programs and ask them to correspond with their alumni? Or is there something we can do to be proactive in communicating directly with the people who are in the best position to influence these alumni, as opposed to just waiting until another one does it? And if we do everything we possibly can and we still have to start calling people on the carpet, then we just have to do that. But anything else, is there anything else we can do being proactive with these programs?
What ties our hands is we have no jurisdiction over the programs. We can ask, we can beg, we can plead, but they have to be willing to do it. And while I know, for instance, UT Knoxville makes a student sign a document that states, I'm not going to call myself that, the very first year they were putting it on Facebook, and I called a bunch of them and, called them on the carpet. So,
And I don't remember why the programs changed the name. Why did the programs change their name?
Makes them sound more important. Seriously.
interior decorators and TV programs have diluted the profession, and I know Rick may have a different opinion. And they're trying to separate themselves from those of us that have gotten an education, who are, working on the path of registration and licensing and getting continuing education and practicing as a professional, from those who declare themselves to be an interior designer. They can call themselves an interior designer, they can't call themselves a registered interior designer. And I think the educational system, as I have been told, and you all may need to chime in as well, they're trying to separate interior design into interior architecture. Those programs that have architecture as part of their curriculum as an independent, program, have a different setup than those that do not, but they've all done it but one in Tennessee. So, again, we don't have any jurisdiction over them other than to ask them over and over, and then, I guess our only recourse would be to start, filing complaints. So, I think we could ask, but I don't know that, they're going to want to do it, because that makes it look like what they've done is wrong. I mean, you can't call yourself an interior architect, but you can go to the, program as interior architecture. So,
I find it highly irresponsible from the universities to do that, because they're promoting something that is not true, and they're educating our students to either be interior designers or architects, not both unless they get a dual degree. And I'm very disappointed in all these universities that are doing that. It's not fair to these kids in college, because they're coming out thinking, I'm an interior architect. Well, they're not.
Let me just hop on that bandwagon and tell you that's exactly the conversation we had at NCWS when the vote came up for whether or not a technology degree was an adequate pathway to licensure as an engineer. And it was discussed and said, all of these schools that want to start if they can get it passed, they will start promoting their engineering technology degree programs as a pathway to licensure, and none of those young people are going to be able to pass the exam, and yet they are going to suggest to them that one day you'll be an engineer. But those people are not taking a curriculum that is ever going to give them the background and the education to be able to sit for the PE and pass it. I totally agree with you.
Just irresponsible.
Totally irresponsible.
but there are also, I got a letter from a parent whose daughter had taken an online course in architectural construction, and she had to stop school because she became pregnant, and she wanted to know what other online classes she could finish her architecture degree in. Even though it was interior design classes she was taking, and I had to inform this parent, your child is not going to be an architect. The classes they're taking allow them to be a CAD operator. Never heard back from her, and wished her the best and told her that she needed to go to a 4-year program. So it's on both sides, and it's, buyer beware. So anyway.
Well, one thing you mentioned earlier, Susan, is the ones we do have purview over are our registered interior designers.
Correct.
And if there was somebody that information would be disseminated to, I would think it would be the whole group. I don't know how or why or how easy that is to do, but
So can we send
just a reminder.
a letter to registrants stating that they cannot call themselves interior architects in the state of Tennessee? And use the term interior architecture, I should say.
Right. So if this is an informational piece, and we used, for example, not even just licensees, but if we use the system where people have clicked here to be emailed information about the interior design program, now it would be, unfortunately, architects, engineers, landscape architects, which is not a bad thing, and interior designers. People get to opt in to get emails. If we did an informational blast email about this program, it actually would catch everybody. We can do that. Now, it's not even going to be just our licensees. If I happen to be a parent of a student who thinks they're going to enter this, I might be signed up to get this. It's not a reply thing. It's an informational. And we could consider drafting the language, because it would be, caution to the public or the consumers or future students. If you're signed up to get this email, you've told us you're interested in the professions of, and it's architects, and because that's one checkbox. We want to let you know that some universities offer this, and you would not be, whatever the right answer is, right? You would not be able to represent yourself as an interior architect, because in the state of Tennessee right now, that is not an actual licensed profession. It's not accredited by any schools, whatever the explanation is. And if we do have that statement, legal would have to approve it, so would administration, but that informational piece could prevent people from getting complaints in the future, and that is what we want.
I wonder if we ask the schools to give us a copy of the statement that they have the students sign.
Fantastic idea. Why reinvent the wheel if they're signing it already?
What do you think, Stuart? Okay.
The bottom line is there's two exams. There's the NCIDQ and there's the ARE. And if you hadn't passed one of those and had the experience and education, then you're not something else in between. There is no interior architecture exam.
One thing, and I have had this conversation, is that in my firm, we have integrated team. We have an integrated team, and we have our interior designers and our architects and our technical people, everybody. When a project is assigned, that team is assembled, and they start on that project together from day one. We don't design it as an architect, hand it off to you so you can pick a material or a color. We are an integrated firm. That's how we roll. And we practice interior architecture. We do a lot of interior work, hospitals, all that stuff. But we're practicing interior architecture because we're licensed to do so. We're not claiming to be interior architects. I'm an architect. I guess I could say that. But we don't do that. And therefore, why as a licensed firm, we don't even do it. I don't tell anybody. I'm an architect, and if I had my interior design license, which I could have gotten back in, the grandfather part, I could have been that too. But I can practice interior design. I can do all that stuff because of my qualifications. But it's insane. How do you think I feel about it? Okay, all right. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for input on the discussion at lunch and today. Is there any other topics anybody wants to bring up? Okay. All right. Do I have a motion that we adjourn our meeting?
So move. Second.
Thank you all very much.
Oh, to every one of them. I said, you're not going anywhere. You're on every meeting.
What is this next meeting?
Outreach. Arizona. Where'd Blair go? Oh, he's hiding in the back.
On my way back from Rapid City. No.
Thank you. We are on the record, and this is the Outreach Committee meeting. We're starting right at 3 o'clock, and today is October the 3rd. We properly gave notice of all of our committee meetings on the 25th, and I will go ahead and turn this over to Mr. King. Let me go ahead, Chairman King, if you're okay, and do our roll call. Thank you. Stephen King?
Here.
Susan Ballard? Here. Ricky Bursey?
Here.
Blair Parker?
Here.
Brian Tibbs?
Here.
And Alton has had to leave us, I believe, for the day. We'll see him tomorrow, but we have quorum. Thank you.
Very well. We have an agenda. There's 4 items that
That's about it.
are listed. Does everybody have a copy of that? I don't have an iPad reference.
you don't?
I have a hard copy. Does anybody need the iPad?
What page would we be on in the iPad?
On the iPad, it's for tomorrow's meeting, and the agenda's on the first page, but I don't think they have any other documents other than the agenda.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the four items are newsletter articles, publication revisions, outreach activities, and meetings with deans and program directors. So I guess we'll discuss newsletter articles. Find it. That's what I have. Right.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Yes, it's the same.
Okay, thank you. Are we currently doing a newsletter?
That is a wonderful question.
Since it's on our agenda.
We are not. I put it on the agenda because I know in particular, we've discussed it off and on, and I know that Kathy has addressed this as well. So I don't remember if I put it on or it's been on, but in any case, I do want to inform the board that if the vision is to consider doing a newsletter again, I've been given approval, or I know it's being considered in different programs. So we're kind of back to that. We don't have staff on hand that would have the time to devote to a newsletter. But if the board chose or wanted to pick up different pieces from newsletters from the organizations and put something together for us to be able to email, we can definitely start that on track.
Okay, so the last newsletter that we put together took 18 months to get through reviewing. So is that going to be the same scenario?
I couldn't tell you. It's got to be blessed by everybody if it's coming from the board and associated with the state. And that is one of the reasons, or one of the problems that many programs did have. I think I actually got the last one that you all worked on with John out the door, and it had been way over a year. And that it was one of the concerns and one of the reasons for the delays. By the time it goes out the door and meets everything, much of what's on the newsletter becomes not needed. It may not even be accurate anymore. It might offend some people because it's taken so long and that's old news. It's all realistic things to think about. That doesn't mean that you can't do it. It's just things to consider. Whoever's putting together the newsletter, and however lengthy it is, maybe if it's simpler and it's just other articles, maybe we can send it out more often, but not with as much stuff. Just things to think about.
Kathy, I apologize. I forgot. There was a specific point that you had brought up when you mentioned that last meeting, and I don't recall it at the moment. But I know some of the things like members who've passed away, students that have passed, to giving them recognition, updates on passing of exams is one things we've had in the past.
Big thing was the disciplinary cases.
Yeah.
That was the thing that I felt like more than anything else to communicate with the members, the registrants, was the fact that it's the most serious thing we do, is when people get called before the board with complaints and the final resolution of those complaints. And it sounds to me like, just because of the last committee, that if you can communicate and avoid a complaint, how fabulous is that?
Right.
So I don't think we should do anything that is, quote, opinion articles, because then you get into, like you say, hurting people's feelings, or, saying things that the administration feels like has to be reviewed 10 times over. But the facts are the facts are the facts, and whatever the facts are, it seems to me like we could get those reviewed a whole lot quicker than 18 months and just keep the registrants informed and educated.
So one of the articles that I had written was in regards to social media and how we'd had a case that related to that. And I was trying to present research that was documented as to why, you need to give credit to the people. It's no different than anything being copyrighted, for that matter. So making sure that people understood if you're going to use a photograph, you have to have written permission. If you're going to use someone else's work, you've got to give them credit, so on and so forth. And so those are informational things. That one would have applied regardless of what year it was issued. But, like the case, cases that we have and those sort of things, I think are important to. And can we put those on the website instead of issuing a newsletter, I guess, is one question I have.
Yes, a PDF can live on the website for people just click. I don't know that would suffice simply because people would have to go to our website to look for it, but we definitely could. And I believe old newsletters are on the website as a PDF. But we can also email it to those that are signed up to get email notification. And again, those wouldn't be your licensees, but it would be anybody interested in that profession that has clicked there.
Well, I think having the information on there is important, because I know when I got a physical copy in the mail, I always looked through it to see, who had been disciplined, how many passed the exam, what were the percentages, and, general information. And so, also knowing that members that have passed away, I think is important to people across the state. And so, anyway, I think it's something worth looking at again.
Key.
I think it's important to have a newsletter. I get asked about it all the time. I get newsletters from other states, and it's a way for registrants to remember that there is a board with rules and laws, and what the common issues are. So I think I'd like to see us just make the decision, turn this into motion at some point, that we want and need to do a newsletter. Unless somebody tells us we cannot, we should do a newsletter, and I think we should have a goal to do it at least once a year. And we used to do the hard copy, and I don't see any need why it has to be hard copy, particularly if it speeds up the process. I think it needs to be emailed to the registrants. I don't think it's good enough just to be on the website, because nobody goes to the website. We go to the website, but registrants don't go to the website. I don't think. And the other thing I hear from our state registrants is about the disciplinary cases, and I think that does a lot, having that in a newsletter. It reminds people of the rules that are being broken. It helps them, like you said. It's definitely a deterrent, and it's also an education piece. And I mean, as far as the deterrence too, it's no fun having your name in a newsletter. I don't think people mind paying $500. I don't think that's a big deal, but having your name in a newsletter might be a little bit more of a deterrent. So there's several things that I think, and that I think that's why people ask about it so much, or that I hear about it. So I think we ought to do it.
I see Ashley, but I think Frank's next.
Yeah, one question is there a cost associated with producing a newsletter? And if there is, do we have money budgeted for that?
We don't have money budgeted for it, and there is a cost. It's actually general services within the state would have to make sure, and the last email we did, I think before John left, was waiting on that final visual from general services, and we paid for it. It wasn't a lot. I don't remember. I don't think it was more than $400 or $500.
Oh, okay.
It's to add some color, put all the lines and the columns kind of in line, the dates in the right place. It's that visual, to lock it as a PDF so that it does read right, so that the number of pages, I think when I turned the last newsletter to them, it was like 23 pages. And they narrowed it to maybe 10, I think, our last newsletter. And it's again based on the formatting that they're able to do in the system. And I may be exaggerating, maybe under the $400, but it wasn't anything, because it didn't involve printing and mailing, it wasn't in the thousands, because I've had programs that are in the thousands. So, that, and then it meets the state standards and can be published. The organizations would have an image, you all would, and so forth. So, that number wouldn't need to be in the budget, if that was also your question. That's not that big of a number, given the $1,300,000 or so we take in and we spend.
I don't know if we need 20 pages of,
It ended up, so now it looks like you're going to narrow what you want to put in the newsletter, and hopefully it'd be just 5 or 6 pages, and when we get it to general services, it could become 2.
Yeah, I don't remember the email newsletters that I get from other states being more than like 4 pages at the most. So being concise is part of it. If you want to reach people, if it's several pages, they're probably not going to read it. So
I was just going to say that we'd be happy to cross-promote it to our members as well. I know we did that when the last newsletter was just.
Thank you. So it picks, perfect. Thank you so much, Ashley.
Do I have to repeat that?
Sorry.
That's okay. AIA would be happy to cross-promote it to our members, so they're aware of the board's information, and it'll keep the board, up in front and center in their eyes, as well as promoting it to our EPs. So, just wanted to throw that there.
I'm sure Casey would be willing to do the same thing, but she's not here to state that. So, would it be appropriate for this committee to have a motion about a newsletter?
Absolutely, and then a plan. Who is working on the newsletter? How do you want that done? Because statistics on deceased, maybe from the last 2 years, we can come up with. But putting those pieces together, the complaints now are on the website, the closed complaints, and we're publishing them. I think my goal was every 3 months or twice a year to publish everything that's closed. But you have to go to the website. So we can get the reports. The question would be who's putting together that information in a newsletter and then present it, I guess, at every other meeting, however you decide. So as part of the motion or in conjunction, so we know how to proceed, we would need those pieces as well.
Well, would it be appropriate to have a motion to start that process? We may can work all those details out today, but, I'm sorry, Susan.
I just want to bring up 2 other points. When we had a newsletter and it was coming out regularly, I felt like we had fewer people that were not renewing, did not have their CEUs, because that was something that was in front of their face on a regular basis. And another thing I hear with multiple organizations, what am I getting for my money? And not that the newsletter, compensates it, but it's just knowing that there's something back there and there's people working, for the profession. But I really think, because I've seen an increase in people who have forgotten to renew since we stopped the newsletter. And there's other reasons for sure, but it's the trigger, exactly. So anyway, that was just my thought. So,
How does the committee wish to proceed?
So when you say to get someone to take it on, is that like a board member would have to take it on, or is it we ask some staff member, or?
So the staff can get numbers. Jennifer and I can run reports to say that here's the names of the deceased. That's not a problem. But we wouldn't have the time to put together newsletter. That is, and that's one of the reasons that newsletters were pulled from different programs, because you needed staff to vet things, go back and forth, prove, and it does consume time, whether it's the executive director or administrative manager or someone in line staff. So that we don't have dedicated people that have that time to do.
How would we look for? We'd have to hire somebody outside, or
it would be similar to a committee. Someone that volunteers to say, I'm going to put these 2 articles every other month, whatever it is. Now, if the newsletter is entirely the complaints and who deceased, we've got this. I can show Jennifer how to run them, and then that's your newsletter. And I guess General Services could add some colors here or there, but if that's it, we've got that information. What we don't have is anything else you want to add to it. We wouldn't have that or the manpower time to put those things how you want to make them look.
Susan, I wasn't sure who was first.
So, Ashley, do you all have the passage rate of the students? Do you all get that report? Because that used to be in there for all the different, for the architects, interior designers, engineering, the passage rate of the exams. Who pulled that together last time? And you're the only person I know to ask in the room. So.
I know that I work with the licensing board to get the newly licensed architects every year. So I'm not sure about the passage rates.
Well, they used to have that percentages in there. And maybe that's not the relevant information. Maybe it's we've had 10 students that passed, part 1, part 2, part 3, whatever. Is that as important, or is it more a matter of we've had 6 to complete it at this testing period, 10 last testing period, I just think we need to show the students that, it's good that they're being recognized for the effort that they made, and that's part of what our conversation was at lunch, is to promote that they've done this. We don't have to necessarily give their names, because at one point, there were over 100 that seemed to be in the pipeline. But just giving recognition those numbers are happening, and then the profession sees that it's happening too. So anyway, that was all.
I asked NCARB, the groups, the NCARB might have that information as far as the rate. But, yeah, you all have the data as far as being able to pull newly licensed architects, so.
And I know for sure that information's available at CLARB, so.
I'm thinking that what we've done in the past is one of us would write an article, and I think that would be appropriate for the board members to write an article, and because we're dealing with the issues and reviewed by staff or legal or whatever. But I don't see any big reason why there'd have to be more than one article per newsletter. And then after that, there are really things that the numbers that staff has. The date on test passing, taking and passing. We used to list names of the new registrants that was, like you're talking about, and other states certainly do that. The names of new registrants, and then disciplinary cases that have come up and been settled since the last newsletter. And I don't know that it'd have to be much more than that. I mean, there might be something else, but that's all information I think the staff would need to bring. And then if either staff puts that together, or if there's nobody on staff who can put that together in an email version, we may have to hire that as from an outside source to do that. But I think it's worth it. I think there's a reason why people have newsletters. It's just a very solid marketing thing.
I'm going to use this until I can't anymore since I'm new, and I don't know. Can I get some clarification? Are you wanting to do it quarterly, twice a year, once a year? When are you wanting to do that?
Yeah, I threw out once a year. I mean, I think we used to do at one point we used to do it twice a year, and that would be great. I think shorter and more often keeps it in front of people more. If that makes a difference, but that's my thoughts.
Did you have something, Brian?
Ricky kind of covered.
Okay, Frank.
Yeah, one other point of interest that I usually see in these newsletters, and we don't have it but infrequently, but any new rule changes, that's important for the registrants to know. And so that's usually when a state has rule changes or law changes, they inform you by newsletter.
We reduced our dues. I bet most of the members, unless they've gotten their renewal, have no idea that that's going to happen next year. So, those are good things we can tell them about,
We also lost the privilege tax.
Yes, we should always celebrate that.
Pretty good.
Ashley, I'm sure you told your folks about the privilege tax.
Yes, we make sure to tell them. We just a suggestion, because it's in the wheelhouse of association exec world. Maybe you all could determine kind of your editorial calendar on the quarterly newsletters and go ahead and knock it out and submit it to the attorneys, and then go ahead and have your deadline for all articles outside of anything urgent. Have them submitted for review and in the pipeline, where there's a standard template and it's there, and so the staff has already approved it. And I know with architects, you got to give yourself a deadline, or it seems the deadline keeps going pushed back. But it's just a thought. That's what I have to do with my members, is we have a deadline, and this is kind of our editorial calendar, and if you can submit the articles, we'll review them, make sure and so maybe the staff can check it out, and if you need to revise it, you can revise it, and then it's ready to go. So that's just a suggestion.
Good suggestion. Okay. Rick?
I can give you an NCARB number. It's from 15,493 test takers last year, 47% passed all sections in architecture. So that's up from like 35 a few years ago. So that's pretty good. Yeah, we need to make it harder. No, I'm just kidding.
Scratch that from the record.
Okay, I guess we're waiting to hear a motion. And how much detail does the committee want to include in the motion? Kathy?
I'm not on your committee. May I say something?
Oh, you can't make a motion then?
No, I'm not make a motion. Can I say something?
Sure.
Okay. I thought Ashley's comment was really, really, really helpful, and I've done a lot of those kinds of newsletter things before, and she's absolutely right. So we got to have a calendar. I think if you try to go quarterly, you're going to run into, but you have 6 meetings a year, and you only have 4 newsletters, and what's the cutoff for what happens in the second meeting of the quarter? You know, you're going to run into that problem. If, and I'm speaking selfishly because I still think the disciplinary issue is the biggest issue that we address as a board, you should put one out after every meeting, and you should put it out as quickly as possible after the meeting when you have disciplinary actions to be reported on. And you don't have to say every single thing every single meeting. You can pick and choose, and you can do, if you do six newsletters a year, you can do 2 that are informational and 4 that are focus only on disciplinary information and rulemaking, because I think rulemaking is a really big deal, and I hadn't even thought about that. But we have so many really important issues out there right now that we want registrants to be aware of if we're changing PDHs. PDHs are huge. So that's the rulemaking that we just went over. And if we're telling everybody that, hey, in 2023, you're not going to be able to carry over your PDHs anymore, you better tell the registrants. That's a big deal. So that kind of stuff that's really important, informational, and is factual, and there's no editorial information whatsoever, can be reported on after every single meeting, so 6 times a year. And then if you want to do twice a year or 4 times a year or something like that, that is more, and here's all the things that you also should be aware of. You might want to do that. But that's my 2 cents worth. I'm sorry I'm not on your committee, but that's what I think.
I don't want to make a motion?
Yeah, I guess I'll make a shot at it. But
That's why you grabbed the
One option could be that,
I guess what if it's I'll make a motion that we move forward with providing newsletter articles to our registrants. Sound good? Establish a calendar.
Yes, for the articles.
For the
For the articles.
For the articles. Annually.
you have a second?
I think we should amend the motion.
I think it already died.
I'd like to amend the motion that we
Well,
have.
we never got it seconded.
Well, okay.
I guess we can start all over if that motion didn't get a second.
Yeah.
You want to make a new motion?
Okay.
Yeah.
Would that be appropriate?
Yeah, I think that works.
Ricky, do you want to go?
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to amend his, so if you want to go ahead.
Make a motion that we do a newsletter at least twice a year that would have articles written by board members and have the other data that we've discussed here from staff that would be emailed to all registrants and other interested parties, legislators, professional societies, etc.
Okay, we have a motion
I second.
and a second. Any further discussion?
Do we need to say in that motion or notes the other data that we want in there, the disciplinary cases, the exam data results, the deceased, rule changes?
Pass fail
Missing
rates.
one, pass fail rates.
I have it numbers from staff. So in the numbers from staff, I'm thinking from the different things that have been said so far, we're talking about complaints and information. We're talking about passing rates that the organizations provide for us when they pass. You've also said names of the individuals that pass.
New registrant, yes.
New registrants, the deceased. So any of those we can start pulling and kind of figure out how you want it to look and get it to the committee to review. So the committee may need to, at least at one of our Wednesday meetings, meet with a preliminary, here's what we've got. Are we on the right track? Here's what it looks like. Here's the amount of time it took. Administration's okay with the team spending this amount of time, and we can try to narrow that down and then go from there. That works.
We have a motion and a second, and some further explanation by Roxana. Frank?
Can a non-committee member ask a question?
We have more.
That's a rhetorical question.
We have a lot of interest.
We're just happy for the interest.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Well, and one part that Ricky has made as part of the motion, which I agree with, by the way, but the article writing part, who's going to determine what articles are to be written, who writes them, and who gives them
Well, let me tell you what I was going to
in,
suggest, if the motion passes, which I'm relatively sure it will, but I was going to suggest that
Ricky write
that I ask Jennifer, or I'm not sure if you're going to be around, Roxana, the next meeting, that we schedule, so we don't typically schedule this committee to meet, but next, in 2 months, that this committee would need to meet and establish assignments for the articles to be written, and maybe some topics, and solicit volunteers or draft members to write articles. Because if we're going to do this, the motion said at least twice a year, so we need to start planning that. And we can also discuss at the next meeting, maybe we don't have an article all the time, but maybe we want to publish some of this data that's not hard to get to, like Kathy suggested, after every board meeting. So, we're on our first item, we're almost already out of time, so I was thinking about putting some of that off. Does that make sense to you two? So, okay. Any other discussion on the motion, and we'll go ahead and vote if there's no. Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, the motion passes. So then I will ask that we schedule a meeting
December, I've got it.
in December, okay?
And something to keep in mind, if you all make great headway, and I'm sure you will, that in December, you have your individuals that are passing the engineering exam. So so your February, not to say you have to publish it by February, but that would be great, because by then you'd be really fresh and on top of those things to get started.
Okay, we've got a few other items. Do we need to keep going, or do we need to stop?
Completely up to you. If I don't
Well-
know that your other items were as big as I knew that piece would be, but you can keep going.
Are there any publications that we need to work on?
We've got to do some research on the interior design, interior architecture issue to send.
That be a potential article? Or is that too
We're going to try it
controversial?
in an
with this?
email first.
Okay.
But it could be something that could be used to fill in later. How's that?
There used to be a building officials publication that we used to revise periodically. Is that even still? on the website?
I have not seen it. I'm not sure if it's still even there.
Building officials publication that had some general things in. You all remember that, don't you? It seemed like it had a yellow cover.
I remember it, yes.
No, we did it. We did it. Okay, well, I'll do a little more research on that.
Yes.
The manual. I know what you're
Yes,
talking about. Yes.
and it talked about things like the exemptions, which type structure didn't require a registrar. We've
That-
talked about that.
That is on the website.
Okay.
I mean, that's on the website.
But it possibly hasn't been touched in a
Yeah,
long
I don't-
time
I
based
think
on
it's-
what I'm seeing.
Yeah, you're right. I think the date is, I'm trying to remember whether it's 2006. or
Maybe that's
2000.
something we should review.
At the
and we
next
can
committee
talk about
meeting, you
it
could.
at the
yeah,
next
we
meeting.
have- Absolutely.
Anything on outreach activities?
Good one today.
Good.
Good. It was good. Earlier this week, I got a panel of two other PEs with me, and we went to the University of Memphis and talked to a class of 40-something students about FE and PE and all of that. And that's really good anytime anybody has a chance to do that. It's just as good for I think the professors to hear it, and it gets the universities really involved in it, because they're the ones who are going to really be effective in making the students, not making them, but
Does the board office, are you all contacted about the need for speakers?
So the website, the main website for all of Commerce and Insurance, has under Contact Us a request speaker button. And some programs are used a lot. So on one of my other programs, I go very often. Others hardly use it. So it is definitely something, if you go to universities, that you can mention it and put it out there. But we have, I think, Ricky, I sent you someone that came through that, if you remember. And at one point, we even had a maybe middle school or elementary school that asked for something, and it was going to be hard for us to fill what they wanted because of the level of answers we'd be giving, and so they were really looking for something else. So the answer is, it is out there, and anyone from the public can request. You could have a high school that has interested students in doing interior design, and they've looked at our website and are curious, and we would move that out to whoever should get it. And many times it's the professionals in the industry. On occasion, it's us. I mean, tomorrow I've got someone going for home inspectors to Chattanooga. So we get them all over the place.
I'm sure those of us on the board would be willing to participate in that if you deem it necessary in our location or not. Okay, and then...
Steve, excuse me.
Pardon me.
Again, I'm not on your committee, but if you are ever asked to speak on the engineering side, NCAAS has a speakers package that you can submit to NCAAS, and they'll send you information, and it includes stuff you can hand out. So if you ever get that, you can.
Auburn and I did a presentation for the building officials in East Tennessee several years ago, and the board office provided a PowerPoint that we used.
And I think that it stems from the items that come from NCAAS or NCARB, yes. And the new items from NCAAS are wonderful. I have a piece for the land surveyors, because where we may not need to or always push some of our professions here because our numbers are good. For other professions, those pieces are very
Really
important
good.
to go
Yeah.
out. And that was phenomenal. And the young lady that is the representative of that, I met her in D.C. She's wonderful.
Right.
She
Really
has an
good.
office in Franklin, really good. So we
Really
are
good.
scheduled to meet, and I will hand her on to Jennifer as well. But those are really important things, because there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. They've
Right.
got really good material.
Yeah, good materials. And then I just wanted to mention that Ricky and Robert and I were all at the engineers meeting and spoke as a panel. Excuse me, me and you and Alton were, yes, sorry about that. And that went really well, but it was a good outreach, and it was great to have multiple representatives there, so they kind of got a comprehensive answer to a bunch of questions and got brought up to speed, and that was really good. And then Alton stole my thunder on Lipscomb, but I'm the one who actually went to Lipscomb and handed out the award, and I got to tell you, that was a great project. Any of you were interested in those kinds of, it was fabulous. It was an honor to hand that award out. They deserved every bit of it.
Thank you for doing that. I think it's phenomenal when a university is recognized like that, wins something like that, and you can go and hand that.
You mentioned in the newsletter.
Yes? Yes. You've got the article. We needed a picture.
We do
Did you
need
get
to
a
brag
picture,
on
Kathy?
ourselves. You know, when something like that happens,
Yes.
we do need to let other people know, because then that makes them want to do the same. Yeah. It's great.
And the last item is the meeting we had with the deans and program directors. Always a success. Anybody have anything you want to say about that, or do it next in a year, or
I think y'all need to do it every year, so.
take that under consideration?
If they want to come, and there's always topics to talk about,
Yeah.
you know, so.
I think it's really good. I think since we've been doing it, there was a point where the FE test take numbers were really low in some of the schools, and they've definitely, the schools that I know about have definitely increased. And I think it was because of that contact with the deans.
Encouraging them to use a portion of the funds that way, and that it's okay, I think opens doors. And so, and that goes for architecture and interior design, and you all don't have one, correct?
Hey, I think we've exceeded our time, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Not on this committee, but
This committee had the most non-committee members take part. I love it. It's great.
That's where all the chatter.
That's what outreach is all about.
it's over though, right?
We're all set. And this is the Definitions Committee meeting. We'll be consistent, and I'll get us started and do roll call. We're starting at about 3:45, so I apologize that we're a little bit late, but we've got great things done. This was properly noticed on the board's website on September the 25th. I will start with roll call. Kathy Ware?
Here.
Susan Ballard?
Here.
Blair Parker?
Here.
And Frank Waxter.
Here.
Thank you. Kathy, as our chair, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Roxana. So the purpose of this committee is to review definitions of the practice of the 4 disciplines relative to moving forward with a rule change. We have a new version for engineering, and I'm going to set that aside for a second and come back to it. We have a definition as has been presented by Blair, and I'm going to let him speak to that. We have a definition that has not changed relative to an interior designer that Susan has brought to us in the past, and I don't have a hard copy of it, but unless there's something you want to talk about, we know where we stand there. And then we do not currently have a definition for the practice of architecture at this point. We've talked about it in some previous committee meetings, and NCARB is working on that, and hopefully we'll have that sometime next year, and that will proceed on its own calendar, or it may merge into our calendar. So I'm going to start with Blair, if you don't mind. Is that good? And let you speak to the hard copy that we all have relative to landscape architecture definition.
That sounds good. I've been coordinating with the Tennessee chapter of ASLA, the American Society of Landscape Architects, who have provided some pretty good input. I also attended the CLARB meeting last week in St. Louis, Missouri, and I asked a lot of people a lot of questions. But what you have before you initially is CLARB's current definition of landscape architecture. And as I read it, I think it's very generic, and Tennessee ASLA has added a little more specificity to it. Not like maybe what I see in another document sitting next to it, but we've enhanced it some. We are not ready to say, yes, this is ready to go. I have asked Tennessee ASLA to continue to participate with me, and hopefully have something prepared and fully vetted through Tennessee ASLA in December. So the next time we meet, I hope to have something a little more refined. But I think we're not far from what we believe is appropriate. I don't really have a whole lot more than that unless you want to go through it in detail.
So Blair, just for, I'm going to ask a question. So you've got the CLARB definition at the top, and then your, at this point, proposed definition, which you also feel will continue to be modified and either expanded upon or in some way edited. And so those are, that's what I see here. Is that
Yes,
right?
that's
Okay.
correct.
Okay. So you want to give us any kind of background on why you went from this one to the next one, or the meaning behind any of the changes that you made, just for context?
I took information from about 15 people, so it's really hard to remember all the details of this. But we started with the CLARB definition. We were looking. You may remember we were looking at I believe the Kentucky definition and the Pennsylvania definition, which we all liked, and we have put all this together, but truly the guide is CLARB's definition, much like I hear the architects saying for it is with regard to NCARB's definition. We are following sort of that same path and using that as the initial guide, and then adding more specifics to it.
Larry, if I have a comment on your proposed definition, I think, and this goes for any of us, I think what you have in the first sentence of the proposed definition needs to be in there. And I think if we can't say that we're here to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public, then I don't think our definition's of much use. So, and I'm surprised CLARB's definition doesn't even mention that.
Well, we were sort of surprised as well. That's why we're licensed.
Right.
So.
Otherwise, you're picking out flowers.
Well, and we focused on that too in terms of the engineering definition, so kind of starting with the premise of the whole purpose of the practice being licensed and regulated is for the purpose of protecting the health, safety, welfare of the public. And then I find it interesting that you all close with the incidental practice paragraph, which is very similar to the intent of what we close with on our incidental practice. It doesn't go into quantifying what constitutes incidental. And I think that's good, because we, in our engineering meeting yesterday, decided that we didn't want to be too restrictive as to what constituted incidental, because we knew that if someone came before the board with a complaint, that as a group, we would look at whether or not they practiced outside of what would be considered incidental, and we would know, as opposed to quantifying 15% max. And what happened if they were at 15.2 when you did the math? Well, we're going to know. The engineering board members felt like we will know whether or not it is incidental or if they are going out substantially outside the practice for which they are qualified.
By and large, we felt that these two paragraphs fairly well described what the practice of landscape architecture is. So,
all right, so we'll look to get more feedback from your membership by the December meeting.
Yes.
Okay. Susan, do you want to talk about yours at all? Is there anything you want to bring up? Okay.
When I go to the CIDQ meeting in November, then with your all's blessing, I'd like to say that we've presented it. It has been approved by the committee, and it will go before rulemaking at some point in the near future. So if that's all right with you all, that's what I'd like to report, because I have to give a report.
As long as you don't tie us down to a calendar, because Stuart won't give me one.
Oh, I said sometime.
It's all his fault.
All I said was sometime next year. So.
That's cool. That's cool. All right.
I did have one thing for you, Blair, and this is just...
No, sorry.
Okay. So,
Yeah, go ahead.
on your second sentence, where it says protects public health, safety, and welfare, most of us read protects the health, safety, and welfare of the public. And that's just, I was just thinking in terms of consistency with the rest of them, but you can have it however you want, so.
I think the idea of us being consistent where we can, that makes good sense to me.
That was just one thing I noticed.
Would you reread that to me?
On the second sentence, it says, whole or in part outdoor spaces in the manner that protects the health, safety, and welfare of the public.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Alrighty, so moving to the architects, do you guys want to, for the purposes of this committee, to say again what you said previously, or do you just want to say, previously said, and move on? Previously said.
Yeah, I think I've repeated it about 4 or 5 times the last 2 days, so. We're in the same position we've been talking about, that we're in a rewriting of the model law process, and so we don't want to jump in the middle of it, come out something different by next June.
I just wanted to go on the record with some kind of comment from y'all, because Roxana is sensitive to the fact, and I think appropriately so, that some people tune in for some committees and don't tune in for every day. So is that good enough, Roxana, to have touched on
Yes.
that? Okay.
Thank you.
All righty. So having said that, then I will guide your eyes on our voluminous work of art here, the 2 pages, which continues to grow, but every word is important.
And it's also 4-point, not 12 or 11 or 10. It's 4-point text.
4.4, yes.
That says 5.
This is version 5.0, October the 2nd. So I just want to make sure that we're tracking along, and we will continue to make changes. But what you have in front of you came out of yesterday's discussion for the engineering committee. And really, we did not make substantive changes other than to wordsmith and eliminate a couple of references that were duplicated. And the primary discussion centered on, if you turn to the back page, item number 14, which you have, which is the incidental practice paragraph. So we talked at great length about that, and again, not to repeat myself, but we're trying not to be too harsh on quantifying, and instead left it to be interpreted. So number 14 is, the practice of engineering is explicitly defined to include the following. Number 14, architecture that is incidental to the practice of engineering and which, A, can be safely and competently performed by the licensee without jeopardizing the health, safety, and welfare of the public, and B, is work in which the licensee is fully qualified to provide on the basis of education, examination, and experience.
So should there be an and?
There should be. I had that on there, but didn't.
Jennifer just caught it, so yeah, we're
so,
good.
No big deal.
Thank you.
But it is wordy, and it's not that it's intended to be wordy so much as that it is intended to provide clarity. As a reminder, this definition started by combining 2 different states and then editing from there. So the 2 states were Florida, which were 2 paragraphs, and tried to accommodate all of the practice of engineering into some narrative, and Texas. And the state of Texas was much more bullet points. Engineering includes boom, 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 boom. So we took what we liked out of both of them, and there was a lot of duplication across those 2 states, and we eliminated the duplication, and that's why we have what you see, which is a narrative which is intended to provide context, where it talks about creative works and the applied mathematics and sciences, and then gets a little more explicit and talks about tasks that are executed, so that there would not be a question as to, is this engineering or is that engineering? So that is the purpose for how it was drawn up. And at this point, I'll just take questions if y'all have them. And being no questions, we will adjourn. No?
I do have a question for you. Number 7, being in responsible charge of teaching of engineering. Does that mean that those who teach engineering must be an engineer, PE?
Means that someone who is in responsible charge at the top, somewhere in the chain, needs to be a licensed engineer.
Be a licensed, okay.
Yes. So that the teaching of engineering is not being conducted without regard to any oversight by a licensed professional.
It's interesting today that, I think it was Christian Brothers said that a third of the faculty was not a PE.
Frankly, the fact that it was only a third was kind of surprising to me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've seen some institutions where it's well over half are not licensed. Steve, you're not on my committee, but you can talk if you want to.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
And I may be totally off base here, but just reading through these definitions of the practice of engineering that are listed, it sounds like they're construction related. There's a lot engineering, mechanical engineering. They design gears, and there's a lot. It's such a far-reaching profession. Mechanical and electrical engineers, design transformers. And all of this appears to be design and construction of buildings or site infrastructure. Am I wrong here, or are you leaving out some part of the engineering profession?
Well, I don't read it as being that restrictive. Item 1 is intended to be comprehensive in nature so that other items that follow refer to back to task as outlined in support of item 1 above. So item 1, consultation, investigation, evaluation, analysis, planning, and or related tasks in support of the development of engineered works or systems. So that wasn't intended to be. Do you think that reads as construction?
No, other than using engineered as part
I
of the
know. If you
definition.
figure out a way to define it without using the word engineer, I struggle with that. I really do. And any suggestion as to alternative language, I am happy to hear. But I have taken pen to this document repeatedly trying to get rid of defining the word using another version of the
Same
word.
word, yeah.
Yeah, it is very challenging. Item 4 is the design side, conceptual design coordination. But we repeatedly refer back to engineered works or systems.
I don't have a good answer to that. I'm trying to not use the word engineering in the definition. But I do, as I know that you guys really want, once you reach an agreed upon definition, for it to go through the process as quickly as possible. And so as I'm reading this, I love an Oxford comma. An Oxford comma is one of my very best friends. And so as I'm reading through this, just in the second paragraph, I'm marking, or in the first two, and wondering, because I don't know, one, I'm very new. This is my third day. But as you know, but since I'm new, and I also don't know anything about engineering, so would you guys mind if I asked you some questions that maybe could clarify, so that maybe even that could be more streamlined once it gets through legal or other
Absolutely,
areas?
absolutely.
Okay.
No, there is no pride of ownership on this. This is not Kathy's document. This is a document that the committee is hoping that we can, as you say, streamline through the process.
Right.
So whatever you want to do to help us is appreciated.
So let me ask you, on just paragraph 1, so if it's engineering includes the term professional engineering, the practice of engineering, and the practice of professional engineering by registrants, that's consecutive, those consecutive things, or all of those things, correct?
Correct.
So perhaps if the legal or whoever might want a comma after engineering, and then it plays more into on the second paragraph, where you get to the special knowledge on the third line, special knowledge of the mathematical, physical, and engineering sciences, sciences. In addition, such services or creative work may be referred to as consultation, investigation, and evaluation, planning, and design. That's where it gets into what I don't know. Do you mean planning and design as one thing?
No.
Okay, so
Planning.
Planning and design.
And design.
Okay, of engineering works and systems, planning the use of air. Now, do you mean land and water, or do you mean land,
Air,
comma?
land, and water.
Okay, so we need a comma after land. Just little things like that.
That's fine. That's great. And I
if-
appreciate you asking for it, clarity.
If you would rather, what I do is take this, and I'd rather approach it here today instead of tomorrow, but if you'd rather, I kind of just take this a little bit and look over it, and then maybe get back to you on suggested changes, or?
That's fine. And and again, since you said you're new to what we do.
Yes.
NCAAS has a model law that includes the definition, and that's where a lot of this
Right.
came from. So if you correct their grammar, that's fine with me. That's fine. That's fine. Whatever it takes to make it read better and have the meaning that we intend it to mean.
Right, because you guys actually, in some certain senses, might mean land and water as one thing.
That's right.
And not in a. so-
That's right.
Okay, so I will do that and have my questions, then get back to you guys if that's okay?
Great.
And anytime you tell me no, I will gladly say, okay.
No. Appreciate the help. No, it's really helpful. And also, I will say this again, but you've probably heard us say that already once today, if not more than that. But the intent, Jennifer, in all of these definitions is not because we're trying to make each other understand what we do. It's so that people who are in the public do not become seduced by someone who speaks well about their ability to do these things, who are not licensed, and therefore put the public's best interest at risk. Any other grammatical or contextual or other suggested changes? Come on, Rick.
I'm not a board member, so I don't have any.
Oh, you can say something.
Committee member, I apologize.
I think it's great that y'all have come up with this, even if it's version 5, so trying to get everybody on the same page has
Well,
been.
version 4 was yesterday. That
Okay.
was the difference, just so you know. So version 4 was yesterday, and Maria, who is not here, took all of our changes and went back and made them all, and this became version 5, so that's fine. So, but as you can tell from conversation, we're going to have a version 6. I wouldn't put it past us to have versions 8, 9, and 10. I mean, who knows? As long as something gets passed that everybody likes, I'd be happy with me. So.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Who wrote number 12?
Say again?
Who wrote item 12?
Item 12. Who wrote it?
Yeah, I read it about 3 times, and I'm still not sure what it's saying.
Oh, I know.
Did
Hang on a
Campbell
second.
write that?
It came out of, no, Florida. Florida wrote it. Mm-mm. Because it's paragraph number 3
Was that South Florida?
that we made changes to. It is part of the model law.
It looks like something's been
Wow.
left off.
Something's been left off?
Yeah. In terms of what's the point you're getting to, you're doing all these things, but to me, when I read it, like there's something left off, It may just been a copy-paste issue, so. Yeah. Yeah, it's an incomplete point.
Well, it's number 12 of the practice of engineering is hereby explicitly defined to include the following: a service, design, analysis, or other work. And then everything that comes after that describes the other work or service. That it is very, very run off. It's hard. It's hard.
Okay.
And right before Robert left the room, he said, "We need to add nuclear." So, in number 12, so it keeps getting longer and longer and longer.
Well, and one of the kind of ambiguous things there, it says, or other work as determined by the board. I mean, that's, if you can't define it.
That was stuck in there yesterday, believe it or not.
By Rock.
Alton.
It doesn't really tell anybody. It's like whatever else the board comes up with, the way I read it.
It was the catch-all.
Just saying.
It was the catch-all.
Think of anything else. I wouldn't put that. But by the time I've read number 12, I'm like
A little bit numb.
get a little bit blurry-eyed after that.
That's how I feel.
Actually, I want to say that number 12 specifically came out as, when I was reading, it's coming back to me now, when I was reading the 50-state document and the background to the model law at NCWS. That is verbiage out of the model law, and that was where they were attempting to address the fact that engineering is not always associated with construction and land development. That engineering can be the creation of new industrial processes and development of new work products, consumer products, chemical processes, pneumatic equipment, et cetera, et cetera. I've been doing this too long, but I do remember that. So that was actually intended to address the issue that was brought up just a few minutes ago about not all engineering has to do with construction and design. Does that make any more sense to you at this point, Frank?
It makes sense that you would want to do that. I'm not sure that it gets the point across to me. But
Fair enough. So at this point, I would entertain any suggested edits or requests for changes, remembering that this eventually eventually one day we are going to get to a point where we as a board, we as a committee are going to put forth documents to the board, and then the board is going to discuss them and vote on whether or not to incorporate them into a rule change request. So this committee is the first line of defense relative to whether or not we like the landscape architects, the interior designers, the engineers, and eventually the architects' definition. So I know y'all haven't seen it in this form until 20 minutes ago, but if there are changes, I would entertain any recommended or requested changes, edits, etc., because one day you're going to have to say yes or no whether or not you want to submit this to the full board.
And I would say, in my recollection, we have had, if there have been people with complaints filed against them, I don't remember landscapes for doing architecture, or they may have, I don't know. Usually it's engineer stamping architectural drawings and vice versa. And so, that's the thing that I guess our definitions would help. And those have been on construction projects. I'm not sure we've ever had, and correct me if I'm wrong, somebody came in and designed a rocket engine and they weren't supposed to, if you know what I mean. We don't get very many complaints about non-building construction engineering.
Well, how do you feel then specifically about item number 14, which is the incidental practice? Do you feel like that is, does that protect against engineers overstepping? Would you feel confident, or how would you feel about the roles being reversed with the same language?
Yeah, I'd feel okay with it. It's just the incidental part. It's like, how far, what does that mean? You know, I understand exactly what this says, but it all boils down to is incidental you're doing a factory, you're doing the engineering for a new factory, and you do a 50,000 square foot office building attached to it. Is that incidental? Or if you're doing, you know, a manager's office attached to it, you know, at what point is it not incidental anymore?
Are you suggesting that it should be defined quantitatively?
I think some definitions that I've seen actually try to do that in a similar manner. In fact, I think the new architectural definition of the profession of architecture actually has below that what's not considered performing architectural work. And it includes a lot like what the building codes say. You know, there's like so many square feet. If it's under a certain number of square feet, and it's not a well, dang, can't think of the word. Sorry. But anyway, not a assembly area or a hospital, or, you know, on and on and on. It kind of says what is and what isn't. You know, a farm structure. There's certain things that the building code refers to, and it kind of follows that line.
And
And
we started with some of those in here. So this morning, yesterday, item 14 had 5 qualifiers on it, and those qualifiers came out of a state of Utah definition and had much more quantitative restrictions on what constituted, and it included things like categorized as a class fill-in-the-blank occupancy, no more than 15% of the overall construction value, including change orders and addendums. After great discussion, we decided that we did not want to quantitatively define it, because there may be, when you do the math, microscopic overages. Whereas as a board, we felt like the board has been really good historically at being able to identify what constitutes incidental. So if someone had a complaint against them and they came before the board, that this body would listen and be able to discern on the basis of the facts as presented, was that truly incidental, or did they abuse the law? So that was, again, it was a point of discussion that we had yesterday to great length, and that was why we decided to take those qualifiers out.
And questions like that, maybe Jennifer, as an attorney, not asking you to give us a legal opinion, but, you know, saying that something's incidental, is that enough? Or do you, we're not putting you...
I think Jennifer's deferring to her attorney. It's all Stuart.
I think, like we said yesterday, when you start quantifying, I think Ricky had a good point. We could protect 10 people, but then, if you had something that protects 10 people or more, well, then the 9 people are not good enough. So you kind of get in that mix. I think incidental is just...
The chair would like to recognize a guest to our committee meeting, Mr. Campbell.
I
knew you'd be here eventually.
Robert Campbell, the guest doesn't feel like much a guest because it seems like his name gets used about every 3 minutes during this discussion. But
you wish.
No, I have been. I've sat back here and listened, and my name has been invoked several times. So I've got a couple comments, and one, I'll start with the last one that just kind of came up. You know, in reality, I don't know that we even need the word incidental in there. The more I hear this discussion, I mean, we just need to say, maybe the word just needs to be the practice of architecture, as long as we can prove by experience and education, or vice versa. If an architect or landscape architect can prove by experience and education that they can practice engineering, and again, we know what we're talking about here. We're not talking about a 10-story building or something, but we may be talking about a 100,000 square foot metal building that's got 2 offices and the rest of it's a big warehouse space. That's why we didn't want to get so in the details, because there's always going to be that thing that gets outside that totally doesn't meet anything that we've talked about. So maybe we just get rid of the word incidental and just say, you know, as long as we can do it by education, experience, whatever. The second thing I would ask the committee to think about as we go through this, Frank, you correctly mentioned that we had most of the discipline cases we had were somebody stamping something or vice versa and this, that, and the other, which again, I think we use that criteria of education and experience to kind of weed those out. Our concern in a definition, it has to be so encompassing. I mean, it has to have everything in it, or it's not really a definition. But the second thing is, just because we've not had it as a discipline item in front of this board doesn't mean it's not coming. And I think while historically engineers have been used in the built environment with water, sewer, land development, I can certainly see the next frontier, autonomous vehicles, which no engineers are involved in right now really on any kind of scale. So what happens when we have the first autonomous vehicle case where a Google scientist, computer person has designed that entire system and no engineer has come in contact with it? That's coming at some point, we would think. But those kind of systems out there that we don't even comprehend, so we have to have the definition, I think, all-encompassing enough that it kind of lets us still be able to defend the things that are not common in front of this board. And it makes the definition cumbersome. It just does, because if you leave those things out, and 5 years from now an autonomous vehicle runs through the building down here, and there's no definition for electrical systems in there, we don't have a definition for it. So again, some of that is cumbersome by what we don't know. So anyway, those are my comments, and I'll be glad to be mentioned again as you all talk, so that'll be good. So anyway, thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments. So I'll entertain, like I said, any suggested changes or edits or contextual narrative that anyone feels like they need to suggest. And other than that, I think we're pretty much at version 5.0, but we're going to defer to Jennifer to see if she can help us get things even more streamlined for the purposes of becoming acceptable as a rule-making change. And even though it's day 3, we have tremendous confidence in you. You could do this.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. I have another guest who wants to speak. Go ahead, Mr. King.
Well, since my committee was interrupted so rudely, I thought I'd join in. But Frank, you were talking about the incidental practice. I think the reason we need to address it, but I don't think it needs to be any different than it is today. You know, even if we didn't mention it, this board has total control of that. So if an engineer designs a building and we get a complaint, or an architect designs something that the engineers thinks is engineering work, then this board investigates the complaint and decides if that registrant's competent or not. So when we made those changes to, what was it, number 14, Kathy? 14, the effort there was to out and leave things just like they are today. So this board will decide competency issues.
That's a good clarification. I appreciate that. Yeah, the intent was not to make a lot of changes. Like you said, the intent is to keep things the way they are relative to interpretations and disciplinary actions, but to put it on paper so that others would know ahead of time and hopefully not violate the intent and the rule. Good point. All righty. All right, well, we're going to leave it in Jennifer's trusty hands if no one else has anything they want to talk about. And I will entertain a motion to dismiss.
Something about rulemaking. In this.
Oh, do I? I'm not.
I don't think you do.
I don't have rulemaking.
You do, but we've discussed it. I think the fact that it's going to move through rules and that we're hoping in December to have those pieces, I think the different committees have possibly touched on it, as well as when the engineering committee met. So I don't know that, but you're welcome to add to it.
So Stuart is going to give us in December a roadmap of sorts for rulemaking so that we better understand the process. And even though he knows, when we all know he can't control how things progress through the process and that things can always come back legislatively or administratively, at least he's going to give us something that we can use as okay, we've done step one. And now we're moving on to step two. So for that, we greatly appreciate that, and that'll come in December. And in terms of timing, the hope is that in December, we will have a set of documents that we're ready to at least suggest that we're ready to put out for public notice. But it will be, after that, another 6 to 18 months before anything becomes an actual rule change. That's the best I understand. If you ask me questions, I'm going to defer to somebody else.
Madam Chairman, I'm about to freeze to death over here. This air blows right square on us sitting here.
You'll have to take that with the facilities committee.
I would like to move we adjourn.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adjournment. Thank you for everybody's contributions. I've sat over there, Frank. I remember sitting over there and thinking the same thing.